All right, hello. Welcome back. Sunday Speedrunner Spotlight episode insert number here. I don't remember anymore. Well, on today's
Hello.
episode, yes, hello. We have a guest who probably needs no introduction, but I'll have him do it anyway.
Thank you. I'm not great at introductions. Uh, my
Me
name
neither.
is my name is Dan Salvato. Uh, I've been I've been speedrunning since 2013, and uh, I primarily speedrun Yoshi's Story for Nintendo 64. Well, really, that's all I speedrun, and have been doing so for a good 12 years now. And I've in that time just been very tightly integrated with the speedrun community, made different contributions. I created the Twitch extension Frankerface Z. That was back in again 2013, 2014, and it was originally intended for the speedrun community
Hmm.
specifically. Um, Tangentially to that, I was very into competitive Smash, made contributions to that scene, and I know there's like a lot of crossover between the two communities. Eventually got into game development with Doki Doki Literature Club in 2017, and to this day, I'm more or less a full-time game developer.
Yep. All contributions have seemed to be very useful and taken off quite a bit, especially maybe the latter.
That yeah, that is true. Although I wouldn't call that necessarily a speedrun community contribution.
No,
Although
just
apparently there
just a
have been
general
speedruns of it.
gaming, yeah, a general gaming
Yeah, yeah,
contribution maybe.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I didn't know FFC was originally made for speedrunners.
Yeah, yeah. Because back then there was no Twitch affiliate, and even Twitch partners were much more rare. There was like not really any formal or automated process to become a Twitch partner. I think they had an application form, but it was just like very manually vetted. It was like much more elite, I
Mm-hmm.
guess. Uh, which meant that like the vast majority of channels could never get their own emotes for their channel, for their followers, for subs, because you just couldn't sub to people.
Mm-hmm.
uh and it was so disappointing because like all these speedrunners had these amazing kind of memes and inside jokes about their runs, and they wanted to participate in that, like the big channels such as Siglemic and Trihex and ZFG got to do. And that was the inspiration for FFZ, and yeah, why I decided to make it. It was for my channel as well as other small speedrunners like myself who could benefit from having something like that.
Mm-hmm. I'm upset. I wanted to show the FFZ supporter badge, but it's not showing up right now. Oh well, but
Oh,
I
it
pr-
is on my chat, but
okay, good. Just not on my
yeah.
side. Not on like the on stream chat, but yeah,
Oh,
I
sorry, random
promised.
side thought. Random side thought. I should have brought this up before we started. I'm wondering if you could also share your video on Discord, like your webcam, if
Oh,
that's possible, just so I can see your face. It makes for
yeah, I've never
uh
done that just because I was worried about like resource stuff,
okay.
but
Yeah.
I mean, I can
If
try to do that.
if you don't want to test it out now, then that's fine. I should have brought it up before we
Yeah,
started,
just
but
because yeah, it's not something I've ever done.
yeah, don't
But
worry about it.
I
I'll
am
just
I
I'll
am
I'll talk
here.
to the yeah, I'll talk to the latency version of you that I
The
have through your
latency
stream.
version. Yes, okay. But yeah, let's see. Yeah, I can't. Yeah, the badge is just not going to show up on the on-stream chat, but I promise I have it. Good program. Would recommend. But and then of
Thank
course
you.
it has like that, hundreds of other features that are useful for customizing the Twitch experience. But
Yeah, yeah. That's all thanks to Stendek. He's the lead developer and has been actually for quite a long time at this point.
cool. Good to get the shout outs out there. Um, but yeah, I joined around 2017, just to give you an idea of my frame of reference. So before
Okay.
that, my knowledge is limited. So obviously, always down to hear more, especially from people that were there. But um, so how did you kind of find out about the scene and start, you know, doing stuff like making all this stuff for it.
It's interesting to think about because for people who came in uh like maybe more around your time and later, or I would say for people who came in especially starting like the 2020s, their introduction is almost certainly like the YouTube documentaries and GDQ, just because of the massive prevalence that these things have gotten and brought to the speedrun scene in general. And not even just speedrun documentaries, but like a lot of the ones about even like reverse engineering games and Ace and stuff like that, because that's speedrun tangential.
Mm.
But it was, yeah, we didn't have that stuff back then. There was so much less of a natural avenue to get into it. You didn't have just an algorithm that recommended you some documentary. You kind of had to express interest in like, or just get lucky and stumble upon something crazy, you know? And I think, uh, I'm trying to think back to not when I got into the speedrun community, but how did I find out about speedrunning? Because that's something that like it just didn't have the visibility. It didn't have a strong community. So how did I find out about it? And I'm trying to think back. Probably the very first like true speedrun I watched was that famous TAS of Super Mario Brothers 3.
Morimoto's task, yeah.
Yeah, the
I've had
Morimoto
dozens upon
TAS.
dozens of people say that was probably their introduction.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
crazy.
It makes sense because that was a pre-YouTube viral video. It was on like all those other like stolen content websites, you know, like eBombs World and stuff like that. Uh, so and it went viral and everyone saw it and it's funny that like no one knew it was a TAS, even though I'm pretty sure it said it in the video, but it was Japanese, so people didn't know. Uh, but there's that. I think I very briefly had visibility of maybe like some Metroid Prime stuff as well. You know, because I was pretty into that game, and that's one of the oldest speedrun communities as well. Metroid2002.com has like these tiny little like 160p like Windows Movie Maker WMV videos of like going out of bounds and stuff like that. Uh, so I think I understood that there were people who like were trying to clear the game in a short amount of time. But it was I can't remember how I first came across it, but Speed Demos Archive, uh, for some reason I felt compelled to look up Super Mario 64 speedruns, I think it was. Maybe I saw a news article or something on like a tech blog. I have no idea. I can't remember, but something compelled me to check that out. Um, I watched a Siglemic speedrun off of SDA and I thought it was cool. Um, and then that came and went. And then a couple years later, I was in college, around 2012, I would say, and I started getting really into Super Smash Bros. Melee, like the competitive scene. I was a big part of that community. Smash Boards, which was like the classic internet forum type of environment, which was really great for that game. That branched off to like kind of Facebook groups and stuff like that. And some random dude decided to stream his practice on Twitch, just like playing with his friends and stuff like that. And you know, I'm trying to absorb more of this material and watch like players who are better than me play. So I check out his stream on Twitch, and I think that was really my first time on Twitch. Was watching like this random melee player with like a horrible capture setup. Uh, and it was shortly after that that I discovered that Siglemic was on Twitch speedrunning Mario 64. So I ended up watching him pretty much exclusively after that. And man, that was absolutely wild thinking back on just no webcam, no microphone, uh, thousands of viewers on Twitch that are just all spamming Frank or Z and utter nonsense. Like it was there was no such thing as toxicity because if you try to be toxic, it literally just got flooded out by the Frankerzes. That's just how it was. Uh,
Yeah.
so that was really that's the best way for me to that's the best consideration on how I got into speedrunning, I would say. That's when it was like really on my radar and enjoyed watching it regularly.
Hmm.
Um, but the story continues because I continued primarily being into Smash. I wasn't thinking about speedrunning myself or anything like that. I was primarily into Smash. I was getting better at Melee, contributing to the scene, and um, Melee's big break was Evo 2013. It was a very underground grassroots game that like it was still in the territory like the Street Fighter players were saying Smash is a baby game, and it's like it's a party game and it's casual and stuff like that. So it's getting no respect. And Evo 2013 came around and they decided to have like a vote and a charity fundraiser to decide who get like what grassroots game gets to be on the main stage. And there was a huge push for Melee to take that place. Tons of money being raised, streamers doing fundraisers. One of those streamers was Trihex. Trihex was into Melee as well, and he decided to have a fundraiser to get Melee onto the Evo main stage. So once again, being part of this community, I found out about his stream doing this fundraiser. So I checked him out. He was a Yoshi's Island speedrunner and also drew a pretty huge viewer base. And Yoshi's Island is an extremely technical game uh, for speedrunning. It was very, very cool to watch, and I ended up just really enjoying um, watching him grind it out. His personality, the chat environment and culture as well. So um, that was where I felt more like a speedrun community kind of thing going on for myself partially because of the crossover with Smash. It like made me feel more of a sense of community that I cared about in his stream. So I ended up sticking around, and it was a bit later that year that final exams were coming up. I was like a junior in college, and I needed a reason to procrastinate because I have ADHD. So I found something new to hyperfocus on, which was speedrunning Yoshi's Story. It was the perfect time for me to get into it. The ultimate procrastination. It just like sink hours into this game that nobody cares about. And yeah, pretty long story, I would say, but that was my entry into speedrunning, and it's only gotten better since then, and it's all been history from that point.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm always very interested in how people found out about it because, I for me personally, I just randomly saw a Salt video in 2017, you know,
Yep.
before it really blew up. But even back then, it was doing pretty well. And, I feel like that's a common story nowadays. But I guess it's also common, like the Morimoto tasks, if you're talking more old school and stuff.
Yeah, yeah, but the interesting thing really is how because of the lack of prevalence back then, I think it took multiple pushes for it to grow in somebody's mind to the point where they're like getting invested in it.
Hmm.
Nowadays, like if you're recommended one speedrun documentary and YouTube like detects that you watch the whole thing, it's going to start recommending more to you, and it's going to
Hmm.
much more aggressively push you into that space and get you interested right away. But back then, it's just like bits and pieces here and there, just over time, slowly growing that seed that has been planted.
Well, for me, I saw the original Mario 1 video, and I was like, all right, I'm sold. And immediately made a Twitch account and started watching. So
Really?
yeah,
Okay.
it was instant. Like, oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
Everyone's different, but that was me. It was just like, yep, nope, this is cool. I'm in
Okay. Yeah.
instantaneously.
Yeah, pretty sick. But I guess once again, like you knew that you could just get on Twitch and follow all of these runners who are like constantly playing the game.
Hmm. That was my introduction to Twitch as well. Like, I just had no idea. I was a
Okay.
YouTube viewer first and foremost, like throughout high school, and
Right.
yeah, it was right in between high school and college is when I found out during that summer period in between. So yeah, it was just I guess it was the perfect time to get invested because going through a huge life swing from high school to college, you just got invested into something.
Yeah.
Here we are.
Yeah, yeah, that's pretty much the space that I was in as well. Like it happened kind of around the same points in our lives, I guess.
Guess it's just the way it goes.
Yeah.
Good time to get it invested. So, if you want to get into speedrunning, just do it at that time. You'll get hooked immediately, apparently. But yeah, good times. Now I'm just thinking back in like 2017 era, which is probably still wildly different from like 2013 era, and then you have now, and it's just wild how things have changed.
Do you think that you saw the summoning salt video on SMB1,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
And for some reason now I'm interviewing you, but
That's okay.
uh do you think did SMB1 already have a special place in your heart? Like
Yes.
what if you got recommended SM64 or some other game? Like what do you think would have happened?
Okay, I can go into more detail. I remember the reason I found it. I actually watched the Mega Man 2, the original one that doesn't exist anymore, but I that was the first one I saw. I think I was looking up the Mega Man 2 soundtrack and it popped up in the recommendation, and I don't know, I was just like, "Oh, what's this mean?" And then the I watched the whole thing because, the storytelling is obviously very good and
Yeah.
it pulls you in, and then obviously the next recommended thing was Mario 1, and that was probably the first game I ever played and beat. And yeah, I grew up with the NES because that's what my parents had. So
Okay.
yes, it had that nostalgia, like personal connection that really solidified it, I think.
Yeah, that's really cool. Um it's similar but not quite the same for me when it came to Yoshi's Story. I think there's kind of another story that I want to tell that
Okay.
goes back again to 2013, and I was watching Trihex play Yoshi's Island. Um, it really was not like, I just watched the stream and felt inspired to speedrun Yoshi's Story. Uh, of course, it did get me thinking about speedrunning more, and there was kind of like a two-piece combo that happened. Uh, the first thing that happened was um, Yoshi's Story was not respected. Uh, Yoshi's Island was so cool and fast-paced and technical, and Trihex loved that about it. He was the swag lord of Yoshi's Island, and he loved flexing, um, like the fast-paced and technical nature, the APM on the controller, and he was he was like the original controller cam speedrunner for these reasons. He was like ahead of his time in that regard. And and so people naturally would ask him about like the other Yoshi games and if he's looked into those, and he's basically like, yeah, those games are freaking trash. Like it was like Yoshi's Island is the melee and Yoshi's Story is the brawl. It's like they got rid of all the movement tech, uh, all of the freedom, all of the swag, all of the pacing and stuff like that. And I'm just like, man, like that actually that cut kind of deep because I grew up with Yoshi's Story. I first got the game when I was, I don't know, 6 years old, and just it always had a charm that made me want to revisit it every now and again over the years. So, to hear someone just be so dismissive of something that meant something to me, like, you know,
I'll show
made
you.
me, yeah, basically, like I wanted to prove that my experience was valid, even though it wasn't a speedrunning experience. It was just like having a good time with the game. So what I did was I went on YouTube and I looked up Yoshi Story speedruns. The only Yoshi Story speedrun uh, was any percent. It was the only category that had been run, and it was like 12 minutes long. And I watched it, and I'm just like, this run kind of sucks. Because it's 12 minutes long. It shows off like less than 20% of the whole game, and it's just the levels that they pick are, of course, it's the levels that you can beat the most quickly, but in Yoshi's Story, that can also mean like the least interesting levels because the objective isn't even to reach the end of the level. The objective is to eat 30 fruits and then the level ends. And uh, so you pick the levels where you can eat 30 fruits the most quickly, which probably means you can do that in like one or two rooms and not even see like 25% of the level. And I'm just like, man, I like this. This is actually like ammo against the point I was trying to make. I'm like, there's gotta be cool stuff to show off in this game that the speedrun is just not doing. That is when I really felt compelled to mess around with the game for the first time. I'm like, screw the any percent run. There's like nothing interesting here. Let's look at 100%, you know? Which is the all melons category effectively. I was like, if you actually, if you have a category where you're forced to play through the whole stage, like take the fast with the slow, then you're probably going to have to come up with a lot more strategy and tech to get past the clunky parts in an interesting way. And I was just hoping this, I didn't have any proof yet. And it wasn't until I like spent a good number of hours messing around with it and I started finding a couple of interesting things that I started getting super excited. I was like, there could be actually something really cool here, and I might have the chance to prove the world wrong and show them that Yoshi's Story is actually a cool game.
Yep. Yeah, I've never. I don't know the intricate details that much about the game. I've never played it. I do remember at a GDQ, I like watched you for a while, and you were kind of explaining the tech that goes behind it, and I was like, "There's a lot there. Like, it gets a bit complicated."
Yeah, it is one of those games where you have Yoshi's Island, which really prioritizes freedom of movement, and let's say Super Mario World, right? Super Mario World is huge on freedom of movement. Like that has like the tightest platforming controls of any mainline 2D Mario game, right? Uh, but then there are games like I would put SM64 in this category, and I'd put Yoshi's Story in this category, where everything everything that you do is met with the game like trying to slow you down in some way. Everything is much more committal. There is a lot more like if you pick the wrong action at any given time, it just kills your momentum. And it is a skill in itself to maintain your momentum and make sure you're making the right choices to prevent the game from slowing you down in that way. I think that's the type of game that I end up really gravitating to and feels really rewarding for me to play. Ironically, like a game that feels like it has clunky controls or quote bad controls kind of sticks out to me because I feel like there's like a system or a trick uh, or like nuances in the way I'm controlling my character that I have to learn in order to be rewarded with having good control over the character. And Yoshi's Story ends up having a lot of that. uh, every single thing that you do in the game tries to slow you down. Fluttering slows you down, throwing eggs slows you down, licking slows you down, swallowing fruits and enemies slows you down, ground pounding slows you down. The list goes on. It's just everything. Uh, but if you learn the exact nuances of, when to jump, when to perform a specific action, when to start and stop fluttering, how to hold the control stick when you do these things, it turns out you actually have the opportunity to maintain momentum and avoid those pieces of slowdown. And it's definitely one of those speed runs where you can watch it and it looks like cool and it looks cool and fluid, but it's not until you actually pick up the controller and try moving this character that you realize what is actually on display.
Hmm.
Uh, I would say similarly to SM64 as well, which is one that most people are going to be familiar with because it's so many people have seen it, but the movement looks so fluid and seamless when players are playing it, and then you pick up the controller and Mario just feels like a freaking rock. Like you can't move it. You know what I mean?
It takes a long time to develop like the movement skill. Like that's something that can always be improved just because of how the game is.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And Yoshi's story is definitely in that camp as well. We have all kinds of just tiny little techniques to get more momentum out of Yoshi to prevent that sort of slowdown. It gets quite advanced and technical.
Mhm. So, how did the process go with like finding out about all this, and then like specifically, what do you have to do to like negate that kind of stuff?
I would say there's two factors at play. One is if you just sit down with the game and mess around with the character's controls really in depth, you just try doing all different kinds of things in different orders, pushing the stick in different interesting ways, and you know, what happens if you perform an action on the ground versus like in the middle of jumping versus right before touching the ground, uh, in all of these different scenarios, you can sort of start to get a feel for the interplay between all of these actions. But if you are also brand new to speedrunning and you don't have the context to put them in, you're you might be discovering things, but you're not necessarily understanding how to apply them. I think probably a good analogy. I'm gonna bring up Melee once again, uh, and a good analogy here is wave dashing in Melee, where it's effectively a technique where if you jump and then immediately air dodge back into the floor at a diagonal angle, you can kind of slide your character left and right a little bit without changing your direction and without having to commit to like a dash or something like that. And people very early on in this game, like 2002, 2003, like noticed this technique of like being able to slide your character like this, and it was actually just like brushed off. It's like, what's the point in doing this? This is just a tiny little slide. People didn't understand the application of a technique like this. And again, for people who are new to the game, it's going to be the same thing. They know it's important. Nowadays, it's obviously known to be important. And so they know that they have to learn it, but they don't know when or how to apply it. They grind it out for a while and they know how to do it, but like they don't know when to use it during a match. So they're just kind of using it arbitrarily. And I think that can very much be the same with speedrunning. You come across some interesting quirk about the character's movement or like a stumble upon a technique, and unless you have a lot of foundational knowledge about the run, you're not necessarily going to understand when or how to apply that or if it's even useful at all, and you might just write it off as not being useful. uh, So that's how a lot of it is, or how a lot of it was with the initial messing around. Because again, a lot of the useful stuff is tiny little movement optimizations, basically, that you're not going to understand how to apply or when to apply them or if they're even applicable until you start building up a lot of knowledge and experience about the whole game. So it really wasn't until a good couple of years into me speedrunning this game that uh, the movement started to really feel natural, and I had all this knowledge about the game sort of downloaded, understanding what I have to do at every given point in the game, and these repeated themes of movement patterns that I could start looking at this more subtle tech and applying it into the movement.
Hmm.
So it was a long process. It took years to build that up, but also, unlike most games and speedrun communities nowadays, I was much more largely starting from zero because once again, the only run at the time was any percent, and they were really not exploring a lot of these interesting movement techniques. They had some, uh, but there was so much more opportunity for discovery, and that's largely why this process took so long because I didn't have that sort of foundation to start with, really.
Yeah, it definitely sounds very similar to like Mario 64 in that aspect. Like takes
Yeah,
years to build up just the skill to execute movement, let alone like specific strategies or whatever to.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. But it also helps a lot nowadays to have the incredible resources available
Hmm.
to help you understand what you need to learn and where it's applicable and when you should learn it and apply it. That's another big one too, because uh, across the board, people tell you like not to take on world record strats right away because it's counterproductive.
Hmm.
Like you need to build up that foundational like muscle memory and knowledge and experience uh, using techniques that are simpler to pick up, like more more high reward, less commitment techniques as opposed to going straight to a world record tech. And that's something that people can really benefit from nowadays, and it vastly accelerates the, the speed at which they can pick up these techniques because we understand the order in which you should be doing things and what is worth focusing on, you know. So you have like the beginner techniques, and you spend a month on those while also learning to speedrun the game, and everything starts to really click in place a lot more quickly, and then you're much more quickly able to start taking on the more advanced techniques.
Hmm. It also was like a good example of, never write something off. If you find something, always have documentation somewhere because you never know. It's always
Yeah,
important to have the information out there, regardless as if you think it's useful or not, because the
that
more you know, the
is
better.
a really good point.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's definitely happened in Yoshi's story as well. I just found this uh, really old clip that I had from 2013, and I made the clip about something else, but at the beginning of the clip, there was just like this interesting interaction that Yoshi had with an enemy where it's like a Lakitu that drops a waterfall on you, and the waterfall kind of pushes you around. You know, he's like trying to push you into the pit. Uh, but if it like hits you in a specific way, it gives you like a massive boost in horizontal speed. And at the beginning of the clip, again, this is like 2013, I got hit by that, and I'm like, whoa, look at that boost. Unfortunately, I have no idea how to utilize that yet, but when I figure it out, it's going to be awesome. And I'm pretty sure I did not revisit that until like years later. I actually had to rediscover it because it was like I was too early in my speedrunning career, so I didn't like download it and keep it on my radar. It kind of just fell by the wayside, and it wasn't until I was much better at the game and it happened to me again years later. I was immediately like, this is useful. And probably within like 30 minutes, I was able to find a setup to apply it.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've definitely heard stories about rediscovering something, but it's just funny thinking about it that you technically knew this thing, but it just goes by the wayside. That's why you got to
Yeah.
document it, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially when the community is on the smaller side
Hmm.
and when and when it was harder to document this stuff back in 2013, like basically pre-Discord, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there wasn't really any good hub. Well, we had forums, right? But
SDA
that's still
forums.
like, yeah, that's still it's so much clunkier because going out of your way to like make a post, or like starting a thread, there's more decision making. You have to ask yourself like, is this important enough to make a thread about?
Hmm.
You have to click through a bunch of pages to do it, and uh, you're putting much more of a spotlight on yourself. It feels like less chill and casual. Uh, and then also there's the question of sharing video content that was also like harder to do back then, as opposed to just like throwing a clip into a Discord channel real quick, and now it's documented. You know.
Hmm. Um, that's actually a question with old SDA. Obviously, they chose kind of what games were featured, but you could still like make threads on games that weren't featured, right?
Um, Yeah, I was not super active on SDA because it predates me a little bit, you know.
Hmm.
I
Okay.
came in with the onset of the Twitch era, but um I'm pretty sure SDA had forums for pretty much every game that was like hosted on the website,
Hmm.
and so and so you had the opportunity to just like find the forum for your game and make whatever threads about it.
Okay. Because obviously they don't like if you go there right now, there's a large selection, but they probably have like 0.01% of what's on SRC, if even.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, of course. But yeah, it was much more curated on SDA. You had to like, you had to submit your run, and it was like a much more rigorous approval and rules system, and the quality control, like the bar for quality control was a lot higher back then. Probably because it was uh, because the community was less established. It's like a lot easier, I think, for people to submit low quality content just because of their lack of knowledge about what speedrunning was all about, you know? Like, someone could like submit a speedrun of just like, here's a speedrun of Super Mario Brothers, and it's just like, I don't know, their best playthrough. It's like a 10-minute run, and they probably have like a camera pointed at their CRT television, and like there's no controller on display or like any verification possible, like that sort of thing. Uh, and I think that incentivized SDA to have the more rigorous rule set because there had to be someone that actually like lays the groundwork on like what is the baseline of speed running and what is worth like showcasing on this website, which is supposed to be like the collection of the most elite gamers in the world.
yeah. And again, this predates me a lot, so I cannot speak from personal experience in any way. So,
Yeah,
just going
yeah,
off of what
and
I've heard.
yeah, and like it predates me slightly even, but I had some visibility of it, and I
Mhm.
remember like reading the SDA rules like as part of the submission process and stuff, just like out of curiosity. So I had some visibility, but like again, I can't even speak fully into it because I was not part of what you could call the SDA community
Yeah.
at the time.
I'm making a guess that Yoshi's Story wasn't on the site just because there wasn't a lot of.
I think it was.
Oh, really?
I
Okay.
think it was, yeah. I think there was probably like a 15-minute Yoshi Story any percent run.
Okay.
Uh, I think the earliest documented runner was Ness Kamikaze
I see.
for Yoshi Story, and I think they also ran it at like a really early GDQ
Oh, okay.
as well. So it was Ness Kamikaze, and then after that, I'm pretty sure it was Michael Goldfish, but that was starting to enter post SDA. He was playing like 2012 onwards, and was submitting his runs to YouTube. I'm not sure if those went on to SDA
I
because
see.
that's when Speedruns Live was also big.
Hmm.
Like SDA was the OG, and then the onset of Twitch was met with the onset of Speedruns Live at the same time, where everyone was doing races and that had its own run submissions and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And once again, I didn't have all that much visibility of SRL as well, so I can't speak much to like the community and what was featured there. Um, but the point that I'm making is we started seeing, I think, a lot of world record speedruns that were not being submitted to SDA at that point. And that was probably like where Yoshi's story was.
Okay. Because yeah, I again knowing how strict they were, I figured you'd have to have like some at least fairly large community for the game to even be considered, and then they have weird quality standards and everything.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, and I think with the onset of SRL and Twitch and YouTube becoming more popular for this sort of content, uh, we started to see a shift where um, people didn't as much want to bother with SDA's highly rigorous
Mhm.
submission rules and restrictions on categories. It started to become more about each game having its own independent community. I think that's really the big distinctive factor. that went along with this shift from SDA to other types of communities. It's because things started to become large enough that like you had the SM64 community who had all their own different kinds of categories and things that they wanted to explore in the game. You had a big Ocarina of Time community that was the same. And so they just started doing what they felt was interesting and setting their own rules and making their own categories, and that ended up being quite distinct from SDA.
Hmm. It's kind of funny thinking about how, SDA kind of spawned. Well, obviously it grew in its own way, but there was, Twin Galaxies was like the original host of that kind of stuff, and then they're like, got to move to SDA. They're a little too strict, and now SDA is a little too strict. Keep it
Yeah,
going.
yeah, pretty much. But we needed that at that point in time, as I explained.
Hmm.
Like the baseline rules on like what is a speedrun had to be in place,
Just
and
as time grew on, the strictness what became less and less necessary. So they had to find a
yes,
place to curate that.
yeah, SDA became the foundation, and then the communities had the opportunity to decide among themselves like what direction to take their game, and I think that's really fantastic.
Hmm. Oh yeah, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's just an interesting progression because
Yeah, yeah,
it's just a
yeah, I
breaking off
agree.
of like the strict overlords in quotation marks, I guess.
Yep, yeah, I
And
get
then
you.
yeah, now it's just with SRC now it's just so free. There's hundreds of thousands of games and you can just do whatever you want essentially.
Yeah, yeah, I really like the sort of the community driven leaderboards and moderation
Hmm.
that goes on with these games. But again, it was all derived from a common standard, which was SDA.
Hmm.
And also SRL. SRL had their own rule sets for various games, especially the bigger ones where they hosted weekly races and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I know you had to
But
usually stream, so there was like you couldn't just say, "Oh, I got this time." Like there had to be some proof
yeah,
out there. But I also know they didn't keep like these official leaderboards. They had like their, these are the top times documented in races or whatever. But there was never like a these are the leaderboards for the game.
yeah, yeah. So now, if you're actually one of the few people who uh, are submitting a game for the first time on speedrun.com that doesn't yet exist on the website, like you just pick some random crappy game on Commodore 64 and decide to speedrun it.
Hmm.
Now you have a foundational understanding of what you should make the rules for this game, because there is sort of a common foundation that has evolved over the years and started with sites like SDA and SRL that you can use as a starting point. Like when does the timer start? When does the timer stop? What's allowed? What's not allowed? And then make little adjustments based on what you and possibly the rest of the community just feel makes the game more fun. Because that's the part that's easy to forget. Like it's always about having fun and enjoying playing the game and enjoying showing off the game. And how can you change the rules in order to maximize those aspects of the game?
Hmm. Yeah, speedrunning is definitely in a nice place now for. It's a lot harder to get started with a brand new game though now because again they have like every game ever made on there at this point that you can think of. But
Yeah. Well, that's when you do get into the PC space.
hmm,
And give me a quick sec. I have to get up for like 2 seconds.
that's okay.
But I'll be back in just a moment.
Okay, how's it going, chat? Good time to make sure everything's running smoothly. Yep,
I'm back. Sorry about that.
all good.
Uh, right. you would be surprised by how many games are not on speedrun.com.
Probably. I mean, I've seen
And
like I don't know if you go to like Moby Games or whatever and look at their like total game documentation. That's probably not even everything, and the number's already absurd.
yeah, and that's the thing that we forget to consider is that um, the the most well documented databases of games are the ones that are published on game consoles because those have a finite list of known games that were published and released, you know.
Hmm.
Because of the quality control in the game console space. You know, you want to publish a game on a Nintendo system, it has to go through Nintendo, and therefore it's documented.
Well, at
Of
least
course,
it
there's
used to. The eShop's looking a little weird today, but
yeah, yeah, that's true. There are, I think Nintendo said there's like over 15,000 games on the Switch eShop. So that's
and
yeah,
fourteen
that's a little
thousand of them
sketchy.
are garbage,
Yeah,
slop.
yeah, it's you're not wrong. Uh,
What happened to that sailor
but
quality, guys? Come on.
Yeah, yeah. So maybe the landscape is once again a little different today, but pre digital, uh, like before the consoles just had like an anything goes digital game store.
Mhm.
Uh, yeah, they had a finite library of documented games, and honestly, even today, like people are documenting and preserving every piece of content that's on the eShop because people care about preserving that sort of thing, you know?
Mhm. Oh yeah, game preservation is both important and very like interesting. People are
Yeah,
always trying to do that. Although
yeah.
thinking about like old systems, like again, NES is a good example. Like, it's easy to document everything that was licensed, but then you get into like the unlicensed and homebrew space, and then again it becomes, do we have everything?
You're right about that, in a sense, but also the the amount of resources and commitment it took to release a game for cartridge on one of these systems was enough that it's going to have some degree of prevalence behind it, you know? Like if you actually wanted to put this game on a cartridge and release it in retail stores, like that costs quite a bit of money, and therefore you're going to put some effort into making sure the game has visibility. There's going to be some
Mhm.
marketing for it, whether it's like magazines or whatever. Um, and and now we know the game exists thanks to that.
I see.
But the space where this was not the case was computers. Uh, Computers are the wild west of software and video games, and I have a bunch of old computers on my shelf over here. Commodore 64 up here, a bunch of Amigas here. I'm a big Amiga fan. But the interesting thing about these systems was that um, basically systems like the Commodore 64 was low cost enough that like 15-year-olds were getting their hands on it. They were banging out some crappy video game. And then like I don't know, submitting it to magazines, giving it to their freaking public library, distributing it like over the phone line to like bulletin board systems, like these dial-up bulletin board systems before the internet existed. Uh, and that is where things get interesting because we have a lot of these games preserved. You know, if you go out of your way to get like the full like known collection of disks and software for these systems, you can dig through the trenches and like find some really weird stuff in there. But the point is that like it's so completely out of the public eye and not on anybody's radar, and when you look through games lists online, like these things just don't come up.
Hmm.
It has absolutely no visibility, and it is fun to explore that stuff. It's really fun because anything goes, you know. There was like no no quality control whatsoever because you just do whatever you want. There was no like ESRB ratings. So you have like innocuous games that out of nowhere have like swear words and stuff like that. uh, just like really silly stuff. And the games are like not good typically, but oftentimes when a game is not good, that also makes it fun to speedrun.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, yeah. So
A game's
Uh,
quote unquote quality means nothing when it comes to the speedrun. There can be incredible
yeah.
games that suck at speedruns and terrible games that are just the coolest thing you'll ever see in your life.
Yeah. So all I'm saying is, if you want free world records, dig up some old game for Commodore 64 or Amiga that nobody's ever heard of, and it's not on speedrun.com. Even some of the more popular ones are not on speedrun.com.
Hmm.
Bang out a speedrun, submit it, and that's worth doing for a couple of reasons. One is you are you're introducing that game into a domain of potential visibility for other interested runners, because there are a lot of runners who like checking out these bad weird games, and they're never going to have heard of this game until you have submitted it to the website and now it's there. And and the second reason is that it preserves the game. You know, it puts it more into the public eye, and gives more space for there to be video content of the game being fully explored and played at a high level. And so it contributes to game preservation as well, for you to just give it that visibility, even though the game technically does have like an existing ROM or a backup. That's not the whole story of preservation. A big part of it is making sure it has that visibility.
Hmm. Yeah, it's kind of
So
interesting
that's
thinking how like game preservation and speedrunning can like help each other. I've never thought
yeah,
about it
yeah,
that way.
that's yeah. There's definitely a crossover in that regard. So yeah, that's worth doing. Uh, if Yeah, if you always felt like it was too daunting to jump into like this big speedrunning community where all this stuff was already figured out, um, yeah, just pick some old obscure game. It could be a game for, again, DOS or Commodore 64 or Amiga or whatever. It could be like some random Flash game, because that's also the Wild West, and just like screw around with it, and there's no one around to judge. Just like submit your run, and maybe it'll catch someone's eye and they'll pick it up too, and they'll figure out things that they can do better. You know, they'll beat your time and just keep the spirit going, and before you know it, you have a community.
Hmm. Yeah, I know I've always been more of a console person because, yeah, again, PC gets a little wild.
Yeah,
There's a bit much on there. I kind of like knowing, like, NES, oh, here's the entire library.
yeah,
Have
yeah.
fun.
That's true. That's true.
And knowing
And
there's, like,
there's
at least some sort of quality control. When you get into PC, like, you never know, but. And obviously, it
yeah,
wasn't perfect back then either, but there's, like, some sort of, like, understanding you can at least derive from. It doesn't get too absurd.
yeah. There is an enticing factor in picking up a game that, like, has some degree of visibility to it.
Hmm.
Like, that has like its own separate factor of enticement. um, that's distinct from the enticement of you getting to be the one to discover a game. I think like they both have their merits.
Oh,
And then
yeah.
the other aspect here is, of course, there's the nostalgia factor, because we primarily grew up with consoles,
Hmm.
uh, and and the nostalgia goes beyond the games that we played, because the console itself has its own personality. You know,
Hmm.
uh, like the visuals, the sound, the quirks, the controls, all of these things sort of work together to give each console a unique personality. That's something I really like about classic consoles in general. Is they all have a distinct look and feel and sound to them, just based on the uniqueness of the hardware at play. So
Hmm.
you can take a 16-bit game and like just kind of look at it and listen to it, and you can tell if it was on the Super Nintendo or the Sega Genesis or the Amiga or whatever else, just based on the personality that each distinct system has.
Hmm. Yeah, I like classic systems because, they had to work within these limitations, and it's kind of cool seeing what people are able to create with a limitation. Like nowadays, it's you can almost do anything. Obviously, not exactly, but like,
Yeah, there's there are advantages to uh both systems in that
hmm.
regard.
Oh yeah.
I'm quite familiar with this because I've been working on developing a game for Amiga for almost 3 years now. Uh, and so this has been on my mind a lot.
Hmm.
Uh, like the trade-offs that I'm making working with such old hardware and the limitations that I run into, and the way that gives the game a unique personality, and also pushes me to be creative in many different ways. But on the other hand, up to this point, 90% of the work I've done in the game is in the game engine and just getting things to work, and 10% of it has been in game design,
Mm.
which means if you look at the flip side of that, in a modern, game dev environment, yeah, you can do whatever you want, um, which uh, which can lead to more creative aimlessness, depending on what your vision is, really. But the fact is that if you can spend 90% of your time on game design and 10% of it on the engine, because the engine is just like this monolithic blob that does everything for you, like Unity or Godot or whatever. Well, that actually you're spending so much more time on the game design. Maybe depending on the type of game you're making, depending on the type of developer you are, maybe that is what will lead to you making a better game, just because you're able to put those hundreds of hours into fine tuning the game design as opposed to working on the engine.
Mhm.
So I think it's going to vary depending on the developer and their skills, depending on the type of game that it is, depending on the creative vision of the game. And this is a tangent. This is coming from me as like a game developer. You got me talking about this, and so it's hard for me to stop talking about it. But
That's
this is
fine.
something I wanted to share because it came up. That's some of my perspective on designing games, like in the classic way on these old systems versus with modern anything goes sort of environments.
Hmm. And with the classics, because again, they're very limited in what they can do. Sometimes they might take some liberties, which create, maybe something not working as intended, and boom, speedrun potential.
That is extremely true as well. You have to take so many shortcuts on these old systems with with all kinds of systems like managing memory, like the number of entities that can exist on the screen, uh, which like down to even SMB1, that actually ends up becoming really significant in speedruns because you're constantly despawning things, for example.
Been there.
And then And then on the task side of things, or now, crazily enough, with SMB2J, there is now like ace potential. Uh,
Potential. It's been done.
yeah, yeah. um, you're right. Actually,
That was a
potential's
crazy fast development. Actually, that was like
yeah, yeah,
40 days from discovery to execution in a run or something.
yeah. Absolutely ridiculous. Potential is the wrong word to use there. It happened. Yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, but that had to do with decisions they had to make on having only a few entities allowed to exist on the screen
Hmm.
at a time, and designing the game around the entity limit, but just like not considering these edge cases that barely exist in the game that allow you to overcome that entity limit.
Hmm.
Really interesting stuff, and this comes up with these classic games in collision detection all the time because collision detection is very expensive on the CPU to pull off like properly. There is a lot of logic and math that is required to run tests on uh, like every potential object that you might be colliding with, and checking like the rectangular bounds and making sure that like you push the character out, and then you just move the character, so maybe you have to test for collision again to where you moved them to, and it just gets very expensive to perform all these checks. And so developers came up with all kinds of clever techniques to minimize the amount of calculations that had to be done for collision detection in these old games. And there are definitely a lot of games where we are taking advantage of that. Like the NES Mega Man games is pretty obvious with the zips. And you see those in Sonic as well. And in some cases, you see them in SMB1 and SMB2J. There's some really janky collision stuff that you can take advantage of because of the shortcuts that they took in the processing of collision detection.
Hmm. Yeah. My tangent is like I like collecting a lot of consoles like throughout the ages. Like the whole like history of gaming has always been interesting to me, and I guess speedrunning kind of lends itself kind of cool with that because you have a focus on games of all different types, and they all have some sort of speedrun potential. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so but I've always been like a classic person, just because I find that much more interesting. Again, the limitations, and I don't want to say it makes things easier, but that's going to have like the most or the greatest chance of documentation and understanding how things work, and they're going to be more simple as other games. So
Yeah, that's very true. The barrier to discovering these things is significantly reduced with older games because the code base is so much smaller,
mhm.
and therefore it's much easier to produce comprehensive documentation of the code base and get a better understanding of the code base uh, and understand what we should be looking into in order to discover these sorts of things.
Mhm.
Um, let's see. Troy's question is actually really interesting regarding like the game that I'm working on and maybe how I might be thinking about people potentially speedrunning or even trying to break the game. If people find a way to ace my game, will I just let it happen? The answer is uh, my desire to fix bugs in the games that I work on comes from understanding that those bugs might be giving players like a worse experience. If you run into a bug um accidentally and the bug actually interrupts your gameplay or makes the gameplay worse in some way, like for example, if there's a bug that just like randomly kills the player, and it's happening to casual players who are just trying to play the game, like that's making their experience worse, and I'm probably going to want to fix that bug. But if there is if there is a glitch where like you have to come up with this incredibly precise setup based on your in-depth knowledge of the game. Like you have to stand on this exact pixel and jump in this exact way for a certain number of frames in order to clip through a corner or something like that. And it's never going to happen to casual players. I don't really have an incentive to patch it because for the people who know it's there and want to mess around with it, like that is increasing the fun that they're having with the game. So what incentive do I have to patch it, you know? That's really what it's about for me. I have to evaluate like the experience that it's providing to players, and if it's worsening the experience for some players, then I'm going to consider patching it. But if it's improving the experience, then yeah, it's definitely going to be left there.
Well, maybe in 30 years, someone will be casually playing it and accidentally discover Ace.
It's
You
true,
know,
yeah,
happened with
yeah,
2J.
yeah, yeah. That's true,
That was all
and,
a
and
casual thing.
yeah, and that's the other thing. Like if uh, maybe it can be triggered accidentally, and maybe it will mess up their gameplay, like when it's triggered accidentally that one time. But if it took a decade and a million players for it to happen once to one single player, I think I can afford that concession of giving them like a moment of slightly worse gameplay to like throw a bone to all of the glitch hunters and speedrunners who might enjoy messing around with that. And the trade-off being like it gives 1,000 people better gameplay.
Hmm. Oh yeah, it's interesting hearing like you're a game developer and a speedrunner. Sometimes I don't feel that's I don't want to say rare, but doesn't always happen. So it's interesting, like having the insight from both and how it applies to both. It's
Yeah,
just an
there's
interesting thing. I don't know how to
Yeah, I
describe it.
appreciate that. And it's something that I think about quite a bit. And like, there's a good amount to get into on that topic as well,
Hmm.
um, because we see a good number of indie games where like the developers of the game are fans of speedrunning, and so they want to make their game good for speedrunning. We see that quite a bit. We see it with some ROM hacks as well, where and there's even more of an overlap, of course, between the ROM hacking community and the speedrun community, where like they really want to make their game a good speedrun. Sometimes that ends up working against the developer and their game design in interesting ways
Hmm.
because uh, as the developer of your game, you're probably pretty good at your game, but you are not necessarily like a speedrunner of your game. And you have the ultimate tool at your disposal, which is that you get to change the game uh, however you want in response to the things you like and don't like. So if you're speedrunning the game that you're currently working on, and there's just, I don't know, let's say like there's a wall that you just like unavoidably you hit the wall every time and it kills your momentum, then you're probably thinking, like I like this wall shouldn't be here. Or I should lower this wall so that we can keep our momentum through this area, and just like make this like a smoother speed run. You're probably going to make that decision, just in response to your own messing around with it. On the other hand, let's look at finished games with a thriving speedrun community where there is that unavoidable wall that kills your momentum. Are they just going to throw up their hands and say, well, that's just the way it is? Like, we got to hit this wall. There's nothing we can do about it. Or are they going to try absolutely everything they possibly can for hours and hours among dozens of people to, like, avoid that wall? That's what they're going to do. And you can bet they're going to find a way to do it. Or even if they don't find a way to do it, that introduces some really interesting decision making because now they're like, okay, well, it's unavoidable to hit this wall here. Does that mean we should do something different going up to that wall, or should we do something different after the wall in order to like find maybe alternate routes that actually save time since this wall is an unavoidable collision? Uh, that is, I think, the trap that developers often run into when designing their game to be quote good for speedrunning is they might actually be eliminating some of that really interesting decision making and discovery because in their limited just messing around with their own level as one person in a small amount of time, they want to create the path of least resistance for themselves. And therefore, for future speedrunners, the path of least resistance is already too obvious and it eliminates a lot of that discovery and decision making.
Hmm.
And that's happened in my game as well, actually. I was putting together a level and there was like there was some jump where it's like a precision platformer, right? So, there are a couple platforms where you're supposed to jump to one and then to the other, but it looked kind of like you could maybe jump to the second platform, like skipping the first one. And I was like trying it out and I just couldn't get it to work. Uh, I couldn't get it to work. It was like, it seemed like it was probably possible because the tiny pixel gap was there to be able to make it work, but I couldn't pull it off. And I had the opportunity there to like make sure that that jump was possible, and I didn't take that opportunity. What ended up happening was I eventually made some very minor adjustments to like the collision detection algorithm with the game. Like I like shrunk the character's hitbox just like by a pixel or something like that. And then I also brought my game demo to AGDQ and put it in front of a bunch of S&W Kaizo players who, on their own volition, decided they wanted to speedrun my demo. And within like the first day of that, they were already making this jump that I thought was not possible. And they had the opportunity to discover themselves that that jump was possible and come up with their own technique of consistently making that jump. If I made the decision again to reduce that friction to the point where I could just make the jump consistently, I would have eliminated that joy that these players had in making that discovery.
It's a very interesting balance, I guess, you have to find if you're in that position. Like, again, I'm no game developer, so I can't speak on the matter, but yeah.
Yeah, I think if you make a good video game, then it's going to be a good speed run. That's pretty much just how it is. Like, you don't have to go out of your way to make sure it's a good speed run. Uh, let them have friction. Like, let them run into obstacles and have friction and challenge themselves to overcome it. And in my opinion, that's what makes a truly interesting speed run, is allowing them to show off the ways in which they've overcome that friction and not just show off like a smooth execution.
Mm-hmm. So,
Uh,
imagine if you were speaking to like game developers, how would you explain the balance between keeping it like speedrun friendly, but not like creating your game to benefit them specifically, like more to developing the game for you and letting them, one ramp it with what you've made.
Is there such thing as like a speedrun unfriendly game?
I guess.
Well, there is
In
if you have
rare
10 minutes.
situations, probably, but yeah,
Yeah,
I know
yeah,
what you
yeah.
mean.
Like that was a little too extreme of a statement. Is there such thing as a speedrun unfriendly game? Of course there is.
Yeah.
Um, like for example, if your game has a 10-minute unskippable cutscene at the beginning of the game,
Yeah.
that's pretty
Okay.
speedrun unfriendly. But I mean in the game mechanics,
Yeah.
basically. Like not in the flow of the game from start to finish. I mean like in the mechanics themselves. Like it's really hard to design something speedrun unfriendly, especially if, again, it is just a good video game.
Hmm.
So I really think the play is to not think so hard about it. Um, Let yourself feel the joy in trying to discover like interesting shortcuts and techniques for what's there and on how to cut corners. And you're going to run into things that feel just barely not possible, like to a frustrating degree, There's going to be a jump that's like 1 pixel off or 1 frame off from working, and you're going to be like, dang, I should move this platform to make that work. But uh but I think the thing to do there is to concede that you're one person and not a community putting hundreds of hours into figuring this stuff out. And imagine the joy when people break your expectations and figure out this jump. It's going to be incredible. And if they don't, for that one specific jump, there's going to be a bunch more that they do figure out, and they're going to get to experience that joy. So make those concessions, if you find friction in your own discovery, just keep it there. And let other people experience that and allow them to have the drive to overcome that friction.
Hmm. So, do you have opinions about, patching in the future when, certain things are found that, maybe speedrunners are a big fan of, but obviously, if it can affect the experience, you want to patch that out, but
Yeah, yeah. That does like kind of go on along the lines of what I've already touched upon,
yeah.
where you really have to weigh like in what ways this is improving the experience versus detracting from the experience, and like what different types of players it might be doing either or for. Uh, there is I have a story related to this, and it doesn't have to do with speedrunning, but it actually has to do with Doki Doki Literature Club.
Okay.
There was an early build of the game where uh, toward the end of the game, uh, there's kind of like a chapter of the game that the game gets you stuck in. Like you're stuck in this chapter, and you have to figure out like what action to take in order to proceed with the story.
Hmm.
And there was a bug early on where in this chapter there was like a randomized line of dialogue that would actually cause the game to crash.
Hmm.
and it was severe. Like if it showed up, the game would crash, and you restart the game, and it wants to put you back into that same line of dialogue, so it actually just crashed the game again, and it was like unavoidable, uh, unless you take that one specific action to proceed with the game. But that was pretty rough because that's going to happen to a huge amount of players, Like if they just happen to randomly roll that piece of dialogue, then their game's going to crash, and man, that sucks, right?
Hmm.
So I patched it, and like a few weeks later, I got an email from a player um, asking me to revert that patch and reintroduce the bug.
Interesting.
And that is really interesting, right? Why would they
Hmm.
want me to do that? And the answer is, this is a narrative-driven game with like a lot of emotions and attachments to the characters and all of that. It turns out when this bug triggered for that player, um, that ended up being a narrative element to them. Even though it was unintentional, it kind of forced them to come to terms with something because they could no longer like experience this chapter that they were stuck in forever. and the game was forcing them to move on and perform like the action that pushes the plot forward. So that actually ended up being like a powerful narrative experience for them. So they
Oh.
asked me to revert that bug and put it back in because they wanted other players to have the chance to experience that same thing.
Hmm.
Um,
Fascinating.
that was really fascinating to me, and I think it taught me something about the different types of positive and negative experiences that players can have with this sort of unintended behavior. And I'm pretty sure I replied to them, like letting them know that I I feel regretful for sort of patching out the potential to have that experience, but like have to, maintain that difficult decision in order to provide the majority of players with a more positive experience.
Hmm. Now, w- do you think you should always like have every version of your game available then? So, speedrunners could choose like, oh, I want to do this version because obviously if you're a big company, you're going to just patch and not give two thoughts about it. But if you have the option, do you think you should provide that so everyone could potentially, benefit from it?
I think it should be provided for the sake of preservation.
Hmm.
That's a pretty important reason.
Yeah,
Not even thinking about speedrunners first and foremost.
fair enough.
So then actually the question becomes, and this question nowadays with every game in existence receiving multiple patches, the question falls upon the speedrun community of like what version of this game should we run and what should be commonly accepted as like the definitive version to run.
Mm.
And that is answered differently in every community because communities are balancing multiple factors in deciding which version to play. One, of course, is which version is the most interesting to play, which one has the most tricks to show off, the best, like the most fun glitches that we can take advantage of. But the factor that that's balanced against is often uh, what is the most accessible version of the game, because there are in fact many games, especially games that are downloadable like on game consoles, where it's actually quite hard to download and play an old version of the game as opposed to the latest version. So now you might have a situation where like, yeah, version 1.0 maybe has some cool speedrunning tech that was patched out in a later version, but like if that's the dominant version in your speedrun community, like you're sort of gatekeeping people who might not have the time or skill or desire to, I don't know, like homebrew their console to get version 1.0 on there to participate in the speedrun community. It can be a tough decision to make.
Hmm.
Sometimes you want it to be, sometimes you want to make that trade-off and you don't have those glitches anymore, but you value the accessibility of just anyone being able to quickly join and play and submit a run.
Hmm. Yeah, I just know like usually what's determined to be the number one priority is like what beats it the fastest, or at least that's how it used to be. So,
Yeah, yeah. And this really, again, it's dependent on the game and the community. And I think for older games that have gotten a number of re-releases, uh, it is more likely that they're going to pick the version that can be beaten the fastest, just because those games are so much more accessible for anyone to play on like any system, on emulator, on some re-release, whatever it may be, and so that there's not as much consideration to make with that balancing act. That really did come into question. I'm thinking way back. This was probably around 2014. I could be off by like plus or minus 2 years on when the Ocarina of Time wrong warp was first discovered, the Goma wrong warp, uh, and that brought the OOT any percent run down to sub 20 minutes for the first time. It turns out that the fastest console to perform this run on with the Goma wrong warp was the IQ,
yeah.
uh, which was, if you're not familiar, whoever may be listening, the Chinese exclusive Nintendo 64 console. The IQ was the fastest console to run Ocarina of Time on, and historically, this community has always chosen the fastest version of the game, whether it's Japanese or English or N64 or Virtual Console, whatever it may be. All of a sudden, the freaking IQ version of the game was the fastest speed run. And they didn't change any rules or anything on like what versions to play on. It's just all versions go on the same leaderboard, and so there was like an outcry. There's an outcry from players, top players and casual players they're like, so now to be competitive in this run, we have to buy a freaking IQ and play on this like horrible controller. Um, and they kind of just shrugged and they're like, yeah, that's the way it is. But that's the decision that they made, and what they decided was best for the speed run. And it was contentious, and thankfully we've moved on. And typically the Wii Virtual Console version of that game I think is going to be the best version to play on for a lot of categories. But yeah, these are decisions that have to be made by the community, and there's always going to be trade-offs of some kind.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Again, I come from, or all my games are generally like very easy. You just play on original console or emulator, and it's fine.
Yeah,
So I don't have to usually deal with the when it gets a little more complicated.
we ran into this with Yoshi's Story in a big way, because Yoshi's Story is available on the Nintendo Switch Online service in the N64 library.
Mm-hmm.
It is, for any percent, the NSO version of Yoshi's Story is 30 seconds faster
Wow.
than the other versions of the game. Which, for a run that is around 11 minutes long, that is pretty significant,
Yeah.
you know? So that was a big thing that we had to consider, because with this game being on NSO, that is a huge draw for people to play the game and check out the speedruns of it, you know? And we actually did get like a number of casual players coming in to check out the speedrun because NSO introduced or reintroduced them to the game. Why, like, so why would we want to introduce the barrier of disallowing NSO because it gives everyone like a free 30-second time save? And there are answers on why we would want to do that, but it's still like, it is a really tough and painful decision to try to make when you have a small community and there's this opportunity for like an influx of new interest.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to think pretty dang hard about that one and how we wanted to handle it. And there's a couple options. You can put the NSO runs on a separate leaderboard, but then that feels kind of crappy because, like, I don't know, everyone wants to like be on the same leaderboard kind of, because it feels more inclusive and more fun to like see your place on the leaderboard. But then the other consideration is like, you're doing a disservice to the top runners by just introducing more leaderboards for more versions, because now the top runners feel like they have to defend their title and get a really good run on every single leaderboard, and that is exhausting, man. I can tell you that. So there's some really difficult decision making to make there.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next thing you might ask is, well, why not just allow it and allow the time save? You now have a version of the game that's 30 seconds faster, so everyone play on that version and you're good, right? Not quite, because NSO is a subscription-based live service that doesn't allow you to own the game that you're playing, and you have no control over the versioning of the game, because they're probably going to introduce patches to like fix some performance issues, that sort of thing. But it's not just about patching the game in this case, it's about patching the NSO service itself, because they can make changes to, for example, the UI that you use to reset the game. And what if the UI becomes faster or slower? You know, what if opening the UI and moving down to reset actually takes an extra 2 seconds a year from now because they decide to change the UI? Okay, well, you're doing that like 5 times in a Yoshi Story any percent run. So now we gained 30 seconds and we have all those speed runs, and then a year later arbitrarily they change the UI and now we lost 10 seconds. It's we just have no control over that stuff. And arguably you do if you, again, homebrew your system and, I don't know, like pirate these games, but that doesn't feel right for a like an active subscription service that is still there. You know, we
Mm-hmm.
really do not want to condone that sort of thing for something that is still on the market and available for purchase. So that's why we have maintained the Wii Virtual Console version of the game as kind of the definitive speedrun version. That and N64, they're close enough in time that you can kind of play on either one. But Wii Virtual Console is very accessible. You can run it in Dolphin, and Dolphin is an extraordinarily accurate emulator, so that works really well too. The controller is fantastic for this game. Like the GameCube controller is amazing for Yoshi's Story, um, and and it is long out of service. You know, you can't purchase that version of the game anymore. And so we feel comfortable saying like if you have purchased this game and you own a copy of it, then it feels ethical to like to grab the virtual console version and just get started with speedruns.
Hmm. Yeah, that's an interesting, just full on story example. Obviously, my go to answer is always yeah, just separate the leaderboards because then they can be treated separately and therefore like if one thing changes for one it doesn't affect the other and you can maintain the history of one version and that seems like the best option in
Yeah,
general, but yeah, I do there are downsides to everything obviously, so
yeah, there really is a valid approach. It's just the one. It's an approach
mm-hmm,
that we didn't want to take specifically because it makes lives difficult for top runners of the game, like competitive runners.
mm-hmm.
Because I mean, you came from SMB1, you know this. Like it can take like thousands of runs to get the run,
Yep.
and so you do that, and then there's some additional category that is the exact same run just for a different system, and you're not going to want to put in another 1,000 runs to just get the same run on this other category.
Yeah.
Which means some rando is going to come in and take world record, and it's going to stand side by side with your world record that you put 1,000 runs into, and it's sort of like it sort of undermines the effort that you put in as a top runner, I think,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and is like asking for just a lot more work from you. That's kind of the thing that we had to consider with Yoshi's Story, and it's tough to make these decisions, and I respect whatever decision any given community makes that feels right for their game, but that's the one that felt right for Yoshi's Story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my thing about separate leaderboards is, I mean, for Mario 1 technically now it would be magnitudes of difficult more difficult than it currently is, but the PAL version is technically faster than NTSC. I actually was the one that we were all in talks about this, but I was actually the one to finally say we're separating them, and now they're separate. Now, obviously, PAL version world record right now is like 10 seconds slower because to actually get that time save is like again orders of magnitude more difficult than NTSC. So that would probably never happen in a realistic scenario, but you know, and in that case, like the game plays completely different, so that doesn't really count. I guess a better example would be like Mario 64, how they separate VC, emulator, and original console.
Yeah, yeah, it's games where it's like the same run, but then one version is just arbitrarily faster
Mm-hmm.
because it has faster loading time, stuff like that. And
Yeah.
in the case of Mario 64, really the reason they made that decision was uh, that it turns out to be a really, really interesting component of the speedrun to perform lag reduction
Yeah.
strats. And that's the invisible skill in SM64 that you don't really have much visibility of, and runners don't explain it whenever they're doing it, but like the entire time they're performing the run, like among all of the crazy movement that they're doing, they're like strategically positioning the camera and have setups in order to like draw fewer objects on the screen in order to reduce lag, and they're doing that all over the place in SM64, and that's very cool and interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't like how there's a version of the game that just completely eliminates this massive layer to speedrunning the game. So it makes sense that they would separate them in that case. They don't want to just obsolete this really cool element that the game has.
Also, I think specifically for Mario 64, what like the Wii VC release for Japanese runners was slower than console or something. I forget exactly what it was, but like that was part of the decision was it gave an equal playing field to play on like the Japanese version of the N64 console back in the day.
That makes sense. Probably because I'm only vaguely remembering here, but I think the Japanese Wii Virtual Console version of SM64 was the Shindo version of the game, which patches out
Hmm.
BLJ.
Yeah, was it? Hmm.
I think the Japanese
Yeah, somebody
Virtual
saw
Console
most recent
SM64.
video talks exactly about what I'm trying to say. I just forget the exact
Okay.
details, but yeah,
Yeah.
that's how I found out, and I was like, oh yeah, that makes now. This is more of an opinion thing, but I always am kind of like, hopefully the original release of the game is what's like the primary what you use, and then like other versions you can kind of separate them. Again, it depends on the game and whatever. So, but like
Yeah.
there is a legitimate reason for Mario 64 specifically, like multiple reasons, like more it's easier for worldwide, and then like again lag reduction is its own unique skill set. So,
Yeah. And in the case of Yoshi's Story, we decided on Wii Virtual Console as the definitive version for a couple of reasons. It's technically like easier to get and play that game compared to N64 because Wii's are cheaper and more prevalent, first of all, and then
mhm.
you can homebrew the Wii and like get the software on there very, very easily, as opposed to having to own the cartridge and then dealing with like more complicated video capture for the signal that outputs. Wii, you just grab like a Wii to HDMI adapter for like $10 and you're good. Um, Once again, the controller is a huge one.
Mhm.
For the Wii. Like GameCube controller has a really great control stick that's excellent for Yoshi's Story, which has a lot of really rapid left and right movement. And uh, the control stick on the N64, it has great precision, but it doesn't have that like large rubber surface area that gives you the grip to very quickly, like rapidly move left and right with high precision. So the GameCube controller ends up being really excellent for this game.
Mhm.
That's another reason. And the third reason is emulation. Uh, Dolphin, the Dolphin emulator, as I mentioned, is very, very accurate and it works extremely well, has great performance, uh, and and plays Yoshi's Story extremely well. And you can use like the official Nintendo GameCube USB adapter with Dolphin to
Mhm.
get a perfect calibration on the stick, without having to like worry about manual calibration and how accurate it is to the original system. Whereas oftentimes N64 emulation is much more of a mixed bag. There's like a million different emulators and different versions of the emulators that all have their own unique bugs and quirks and that sort of thing. So that is kind of where things are with Yoshi's Story. We do allow emulator submissions, but only with the
Mhm.
Dolphin emulator and the Wii
Mhm.
Virtual Console version, and not the N64 version because it's so much easier to confirm the accuracy of the of a Dolphin compared to all these other N64 emulators.
Mhm. So yeah, all of this is just game by game basis, community by community basis.
Yeah, yeah,
There's so many intricate details. Uh,
yeah, yeah,
Another
and
thing about I was gonna say about the Switch version. I know the Switch natively has zero point 0.1 seconds of input delay, which I'm sure does not help for Yoshi's Story.
um, let me think. I think I had a pretty good experience playing Yoshi's Story on NSO.
Oh, okay.
Um, yeah, I'm 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 sure maybe if I tried to do serious runs on NSO, there would be a barrier there because
Mhm.
admittedly I didn't. I just messed around with it, you know.
Yeah.
So maybe I wasn't like super attuned to like the tight areas where that might actually mess me up. But
It's very noticeable for Mario 1, I can say at least.
for yeah. But the factor here is really it has more to do with what your muscle memory is used to
Mhm.
because speedruns they're really all about visual cues and audio cues and muscle memory that you've gained. And so I think a player who plays on a setup with some degree of input lag has the opportunity to get as good as a player who's playing on a setup without it, simply because like their brain is naturally going to accommodate and learn slightly different visual cues and slightly different muscle memory to compensate for it.
Mhm.
And they're ultimately going to have quite similar gameplay.
Yeah, I guess it was more specifically like if you're already a veteran runner having to learn a new version, it'd be like, well, this is a problem now.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that.
So just
And
just another factor.
yeah, and in general, every setup feels a tiny bit different. Every version of the game,
Hmm.
like what monitor you use, like what audio output you use, like because audio delay is something that can throw you off as well.
Oh yeah.
There's just all these different factors, and you're probably going to spend most of your time on one specific setup, and are going to want to stick with that like over the years because it's what you've built up your skills on.
Yeah. Makes sense. I think I'll try to move into a different topic here. Because it sounds like we kind of talked about all of that now. But obviously you made Doki Doki Literature Club and you're making another game for Amiga. I don't know if you have any other projects currently. I know those are the big two, but you said like there's obviously some people that have taken up speedrunning for those. So how does that look from like you having developed those games? How do those runs look and what do they like mean to you? What do they look like to you? And
I mean, DDLC is a visual novel,
yeah, that's
so
a bit harder,
no
but
one no one I think really runs it with a high degree of seriousness, and I've never even looked into it because uh
really? Okay.
yeah, because because
Oh, there's got to be a little bit of interest, right?
um the part that interests me and makes me happy is that like people have decided that it's like a way for them to have fun with the game. That's really the
Mhm.
important part to me, you
Yeah.
know.
Okay.
But as a speedrunner myself, like the tech that they might have discovered in speedrunning through a visual novel is not necessarily like the tech that really interests and fascinates me as a speedrunner.
Fair.
So that's really the reason I haven't like looked into it. But again, I'm very happy that people are like finding unique ways to enjoy the game like that.
It's kind of interesting given your background that that's the kind of game you decided to make. But
Yeah, well, I have well, like most people, I have a lot of things that I'm into, a lot of
mhm.
like experiences that were meaningful to me in some way. And as a beginner game developer, it turned out to be a lot easier to get into making a visual novel and trying to convey like, you know, experiences that were emotionally powerful to me. Um, through a more accessible type of game that's like narrative driven
Mhm.
rather than uh, rather than taking on a game of greater complexity where I would have to learn two or three or four times as many skills at the same time in order to like put out something passable.
I
So
see.
it just turned out to be a great starting point. And now, of course, I am working on more complex games.
I
But
didn't realize you were like a beginner making that. I'll be real.
I had a good amount of coding experience and like technical experience in general. When I say beginner, I mean beginner to like making video games from scratch. That's
Hmm.
the best way to put it.
Yeah,
But yeah,
I see
I had
what
a
you mean.
pretty big technical background.
But
Um,
still, you kind of, at least as far as the internet's concerned, kind of hit it out of the park then immediately.
yeah,
So,
yeah, it went pretty well. And that makes me think of there are other stories of that too. Balatro,
oh
that was
yeah.
Local Thung's first game. Um, and he himself jokes about like the code base being a mess because it was like an educational project for him. Stardew Valley, I think, was pretty similar.
Oh
I
yeah.
think that was maybe Concerned Ape's first game, and therefore, and you know, I think it's come up that that was also like a pretty messy code base for that reason. But um,
As
I
long
don't
as
know
it works, I
that.
guess.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing about the accessibility of these tools nowadays is that you have the opportunity to like put out something high quality even if you're a beginner, and
Hmm.
internally it's going to look messy and uh maybe harder to maintain down the road, or more opportunity for like bugs to be introduced because of maybe the lack of solid infrastructure. But you made a game, and it works pretty well,
Mm-hmm.
and that's really great.
Yeah,
I'm
I never would have guessed that this was like your first big project. That Balatro was like their first game. Stardew Valley. Yeah, I never would have guessed. So,
Yeah,
in
yeah,
fact, that's why I was surprised when you said that. I was like, wait, really?
because we see the end result,
Mm-hmm.
which the end result looks quite polished because like we achieved the end result we wanted to see, but that doesn't mean behind the scenes there's like a lot of messes happening, and uh and that's true. Like there's so many games
Mm-hmm.
where we see a lot of that, like I'm just talking about these indie games of like developers who are still learning, but man, um like big budget games on a tight deadline back in the day, they were full of this stuff,
Oh yeah.
and we are taking advantage of that as speedrunners for sure. The shortcuts that a lot of them took. That again, the end result looks fantastic, but as soon as we take a peek behind the scenes, messing around with some of the gameplay, or in some cases reverse engineering some of the game, we the infrastructure shows its true colors, and that increases our joy of the experience because we get to take advantage of that to have more fun.
I see. Yeah. And then, is this Amiga game? Was that your next project? And then what you've been doing since?
I have other stuff that I'm working on, but I just can't talk about it yet.
I see. Okay. Yeah, I'm
But
not trying to break NDA, but
yeah, of course. The Amiga project, which the full title is Magicore Anomala, or I just call it Magicore for short. I've been like, pretty public about it because it's been more of like a side project, a passion project, and so,
Mhm.
so you're able to look up some, like some video footage of like early gameplay demos and that sort of thing. And I have a blog where I go into a lot of technical detail about what it's like to develop on such old hardware as well.
Mhm.
So, if that stuff interests you, then you're more than welcome to check it out. And I bring the game to GDQ as well.
Mhm.
Every
I've definitely
GDQ I
seen
go
it.
to. Awesome.
It
Yeah. And and watching people, it's a special experience to watch people have fun with something that you made.
Mhm.
And that could be a game. It could be a ROM hack. Again, like I really love the S&W ROM hacking community, and I can really understand. It could be Mario Maker.
Mhm.
Putting together a Mario Maker level and watching people like enjoy it. Uh, it feels really good to it's one thing to tell a story and experience people like with, a personal emotional attachment to the story that you have told, but it's a unique feeling to put together a gameplay experience and watch people like push buttons on the controller and getting joy from that. It's like, I don't know. It's a more like primal joy that I just really I've discovered that I really love that, and it really drives me to put my all into the design of these games and allow people to feel that sort of intrinsic joy of just moving the character.
Mhm. That made me remember that this upcoming SGDQ is gonna have what they call an artist alley, and I'm sure like indie developers could like bring their projects in and show them
Yeah,
off
I'm
there. This is the first time they're doing something like that.
I'm really excited for it. I think people have been hoping to see that sort of thing for years
Oh yeah.
because GDQ is such a hub for incredible talent and creative content. Um, attendees deserve a platform to demonstrate the sort of stuff that they're working on, and like we've sort of cludged that together in the practice room in the past.
Mhm.
So GDQ actually giving them a platform is really fantastic, and um and I'm curious to see kind of what the layout is going to be because uh this came out. I think there was a staff member who talked to me about this or something similar at AGDQ
Mm.
in January because I had my Magic Core demo set up in the practice room. So they were saying like, hey, we would love to have like some kind of showcase for like indie game developers and the games that they're working on, and do you have any opinions about that, or how would you feel about it? And really the main thing I told them was if that is to happen, I don't want it to really be in its own like separate isolated room,
Hmm.
because what's going to happen is like people walk in and they just like check things out for a few minutes and then they leave, and that's kind of it. I want it to be I want it to be integrated into like some key area that people tend to mingle, such as the practice room.
Hmm.
If you just have a section of the practice room that's like the indie showcase or whatever, or the artist alley, and it changes out every day, then there's going to be a lot more eyes on it, a lot more people wanting to stick around and chill and interact with those things. And that's really the environment that I think would thrive.
Hmm.
However, if it is a more generic artist alley and there's like a lot more participants, and artists are going to need a lot more space because they need whole booths and not just like a console setup,
Hmm.
then I'm sure logistically that's probably going to have to be more in its own space, and I can respect that as well. I was thinking mainly like the indie game showcase thing. That's how I would like to see it done, but it's going to be a learning experience for everybody because this is their first time doing it. It's our first time experiencing it as attendees, and I am thrilled that they're taking this first step, and I can't wait to see it, and I can't wait to see how it's going to improve over time as well.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm very interested. I went to my first like kind of non speedrun focused event, which was PAX West last year, and that was because I got into the GDQ showcase. So
Okay,
it was
cool.
still there anyway, but that was my
Yeah,
first time being able to like walk around and see, what people are working on. And I don't know, there's just something really cool about being able to talk to developers and artists and see their project right in front of you. And
yeah, yeah, it is cool, and I think PAX in recent events has had like more of an indie presence going on as well.
oh, the indie,
So
the room they had for indie was like twice as big as the other room. Yeah.
that's
It was
amazing.
crazy, yeah.
Yeah,
But
that's really cool.
and a lot of them had like, speedrun leaderboards for their thing.
That's
One
awesome.
of the devs recognized me, which was kind of weird, but I'll take it. But
Yeah,
yeah, that was just a really cool experience, and I personally had never been able to have that experience before. So the fact that they're bringing something similar to GDQ now is just so cool,
yeah,
and I'm really
yeah.
excited to see how that works because.
It's definitely been a long time coming, and
Mhm.
I'm I'm gonna be all about it when I attend this year.
Are you gonna put up your stuff as part of that?
Um, I don't know yet because I don't know logistically how the system works out.
Mm.
If it's an open space, or they took applications ahead of time, or if it's primarily artists or primarily developers, how far it is from the practice room, because I spend all my time chilling with like the SNW folks in the practice room, and that's always where I set up my Amiga, is like with them
Mhm.
basically. And so I might actually prefer like doing that this time around because I just I like chilling with my friends basically.
No, I get it.
It's yeah, it's part of my experience, and that is my priority, and not trying to like market this freaking Amiga game that I'm working on, you know what I mean? I'm there to
Oh
have fun.
yeah. No, I was just curious if you knew like kind of how they were setting it up, but it sounds
Yeah,
like that's kind
yeah.
of a mystery currently.
Yeah, I haven't looked into it.
Yeah. Okay. I got it. I mean, we'll find out in what 2 months, so
Yep,
not
for
too long
sure.
of a wait. But
Yep.
well, anyway, speaking of GDQ, we didn't really go into like your history with events. Um, do you remember the first event you watched and then the first event you attended?
I first watched SGDQ 2013.
Okay, that was
Uh,
the event before like the big first million, what really put it on the map thing,
I think so, yeah.
because that was a 2014.
SGDQ 2013, the stream setup was still in like a weird hotel conference room.
Yeah, the I know obviously the first GDQ was a basement, and then I think the next few AGDQs were, you know, some were very small, but yeah, something like that. But I know the first couple SGDQs were just at a house again. Like it
Oh,
took a while
okay.
for summer to be like somewhere, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah. The one that I saw 2013, like it was in a hotel, but I
Okay.
think like the stream room was again just like a conference room kind of.
Yeah,
Um,
that might have been their first summer event that was
yeah,
somewhere like
and
that then.
then AGDQ 2014 was the first one that I attended, and that had like a setup in more of an auditorium environment where they had a
Hmm.
projector and stuff like that. Um, but they didn't have a full-on stage. I'm pretty sure they weren't like that size yet. It
Yeah,
was just
no.
like they were kind of in the back of the auditorium with like a few rows of chairs set up and a projector.
Hmm.
But it was uh, the rapid growth had begun
Oh
basically.
yeah, no, the just 1 year difference. I mean, you could see right then and there. You saw it, and then 1 year later you went, and it was probably twice as big, if not more, already in that 1 year.
Yeah, yeah. The ramp up was very significant. Um, yeah. So I went to AGDQ 2014 and I got to run Yoshi's Story All Melons as a bonus game because the event was
Oh,
still small enough that like after like the schedule had concluded and we reached the end of the event, um they had like a bonus stream and you could basically just like ask to
oh
run your
yeah,
game on the bonus stream, and it was like this really loose casual, like they're just like, all right, let's just have whoever wants to show off their run. And I got to do Yoshi's Story for that.
yeah. I have heard of that, and yeah, it's not something they would ever do nowadays. But I'm
Oh
guessing,
yeah.
is that footage like lost because since it's not
um
on the official schedules or anything, I've never like seen bonus stream content anywhere.
No, at the very least, starting with AGDQ 2014, they have VODs of all the bonus stream content. So
Oh, they do.
you're able to look up, yeah, you're able to look up the All Melons run that I did during that bonus
Okay,
stream.
where can you find that? I'm actually quite curious where you
It,
can find
it should
bonus
just
stream
be on,
content.
it should be on YouTube.
Is it? Huh.
Yeah,
I don't know
I'm
why
not sure if
I
it's,
was never able to find it, but I'll look again.
yeah, I don't know if they put bonus stream in the title of the video. It might just say AGDQ 2014 Yoshi's Story All Melons. I'm not
Oh,
sure. I
okay.
haven't looked in a long time,
Interesting.
but yeah,
Like
it should be there.
I use the GDQ VODs website usually if I want to look up old stuff, and
Okay.
I don't know if they
Okay.
include that kind of stuff because it's usually like the schedule, like
That makes
first game to
sense. Yeah.
finale. So
Okay.
I'll do some more
Yeah.
digging, but yeah, I've just heard about like the bonus stream content. And I've never seen it, so I was just curious how that worked.
Yeah. Yeah. It should be there.
Okay.
And since then, well, starting with AGDQ 2014, I think I submitted Yoshi's Story All Melons and it didn't get in. And for the next like 3 years, I submitted it to every single GDQ and it never got in. And it became like kind of a running joke in the speedrun community. Because people generally accepted that it was a cool run. Um, and every event, I like put out these kind of exaggerated hype montages of Yoshi's Story All Melons to like market the run and hopefully like improve its chances of getting in. But um, in retrospect, it was like pretty obnoxious, I would say, or that was definitely at least the perspective of the GDQ staff. Uh, the speedrun community like freaking loved it and it got them hype and they're like, they got in the spirit, but like the GDQ staff was like, man, like this dude has to like market his speedrun and put together a hype montage just to like try to play up his crappy game. Like
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure those montages like worked significantly against my chances of actually getting in because it was as though I was trying to rile up a crowd to like pressure the staff to get my game accepted.
Mm,
And it was just like, I think from their perspective, it was pretty obnoxious.
it's interesting. But did you like attend every event still?
No, I attended AGDQ 2014, 2015, I think 2016. I can't remember, but then I moved and got busier and stopped attending for a long time until 2022 actually is when I came back to the GDQs, I'm pretty sure.
That's when they
Or
came
maybe
back
23, I
too
forget.
after COVID.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I can't remember if I was at that one or like the next one after
Hmm.
after they came back. I can't quite remember, but Uh, so pretty long hiatus from attending the events, like a good 6 years, I would say. And my speed runs were also sort of off and on. Uh, but yeah, I came back in full swing, and it's just more fun than ever. Like the event
Mm-hmm.
has gotten so incredible, and I have so many more friends in the community that it's just an absolute blast every time I go, and it is very creatively inspiring as well.
Oh
Because
yeah.
again, all of the minds there are so creative, so you're always talking about like cool ideas that you have for like making stuff, games or whatever, and or ROM hacks, whatever it may be, and it's just like so from, I don't know, you could say from a business standpoint, it's become like a very invigorating event for me as a creative spirit as well.
Mm-hmm. And I think we can say this all led to the eventual acceptance finally.
Yeah, SGDQ 2024 last year, Yoshi's Story All Melons finally got accepted. Uh, and looking back, the strategy was that back in 2014, 2015, 2016, I was putting out these stupid hype videos that got the community like all energized to see Yoshi's Story All Melons, and then the staff was like, "Man, this is stupid. We're rejecting it." Fast forward 10 years, guess who's on the staff now? It's those dinky little kids who were getting all hype about the montages. So I got my in, you know, like a little infiltration of the melons, and finally get the run accepted into GDQ to close off that the 10-year long con that I pulled off.
Played the long game, but it worked out. Not only that,
It-
it was the
exactly.
opener.
It was the opener.
It was the
Man,
opener.
I was so freaking nervous. It was uh it was a lot of fun, but when you get to do your first run on the GDQ stage, like yeah, the nerves are real, and it's quite hard to look past all the mistakes that you make,
Mm-hmm.
you know? That's like cuz you know what you're capable of. You know everything that you want to show off. So everything that you don't get to show off because you made a mistake, like feels like you just missed an opportunity to show off your cool thing to 100,000 people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of like when I walked away from it, my mind was just like replaying all the mistakes that I made in the run. But I think that was quickly offset by like just dozens of people. Like when they see me, they tell me like how fun and amazing it was to watch the run, and it just lifted my spirits a lot and made me really happy. And I realized that people don't have the same experience of what I have in my head. They enjoy the things that they do see,
Mm-hmm.
and the things that they don't see doesn't matter because that wasn't part of their experience, and they enjoyed their experience. So uh, yeah, it left me with a really positive memory in the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're always going to be your worst critic anyway. So
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
what matters more is what other people have to say. And yeah,
Yeah,
that's good.
yeah. If I had the chance to bring people joy through something that means a lot to me, that's everything that I could ask for. Being able to share my personal experiences and what brings me joy with others has always been my creative drive.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I receive that validation that I've gotten to share something personal to me with somebody, and they also receive joy from it or a positive experience, or it meant something to them in some way, um, I think for me, that's the most meaningful experience that I could have as an individual.
Mm-hmm. And then you've also done work that wasn't you directly running, but there's been some ROM hacks races and stuff. I don't know the full history of everything you've helped out with. I just know one specific example, but
Yeah, just whatever communities meant something to me, like I always feel a drive to contribute to them in some way. S&W ROM hacks, I never made a ROM hack myself, but I've contributed like music ports to the scene. That was something that interested me, and I decided to try my hand at that, and that was a lot of fun. Um, let's see. I ended up I did end up contributing to a level in the S&W relay race last SGDQ.
Mhm.
Um, there was a level called Shattered Reality, which was actually a collab between like 5 people, with me being kind of like the, I don't know, the quote creative director or like design director for it. But I didn't actually really do any code S&W code. That came from some engineers who are like far more talented than me.
I see.
But yeah, I was able to contribute design wise, and that was really rewarding. Um, Other random stuff that I've like touched on, or contributed to. I made like a tracker for the SM64 randomizer, uh, because I just randomly got really into that for a couple of months, and I wanted to make a tracker that worked well for me. So I put that together, and that's still live, and I think quite a few people still use it. Um, but yeah, it's just being a part of these communities, like really gives me a desire to contribute to them. It's like they mean so much to me, and I want to be able to share that with other people, and make my own contributions, and just like be included, be a part of the community, and get to share and spread the love.
Mhm. Yeah, I remember you actually like the day before that Mario World ROM hack thing. You showed me the level very secretively.
Yeah, yeah. It was
Yeah,
it was pretty monumental.
yeah,
The
that was a
amount of
bit
effort we
wild.
put into it, like, yeah, it came from uh the previous year at SGDQ. Um, I had my Amiga set up with like a Magic Core demo, and so my mind it was on like bullet hell type platformers. Um, and yeah, I don't remember exactly how it came up, but I got into a conversation with Dita the Fourth about like the potential for there to be like a bullet hell in Super Mario World, and um, I don't know. She's the type of person where if you like plant an interesting idea in her head, then she's gonna like her gears are gonna turn until she has like reached some conclusion. And oftentimes that conclusion is going to be her coming back to you and she has implemented it. So yeah, that's what happened. She decided that it might be possible to do bullet hell in Super Mario World if instead of having like a bunch of sprites playing, what if you just play a freaking real-time video in the game and then you can just draw whatever you want? And that's what she did. She got to work and wrote a freaking engine like in assembly language within the Super Mario World game engine to play live video at 60 frames per second in the game's background. Uh, and that became the foundational technology for us to make this level. So we ended up drawing in a lot of talent from, of course, D4 was on the engineering side and did some really amazing stuff where we could like, depending on the color of the pixel in the video, that would tell you if it's like a bullet or if it's like a platform you could stand on, stuff like that. Um, and then I brought in a couple designers from the I Want to Be the Guy fan game community who does these sorts of avoidance bullet hell levels all the time. So they put together attacks in like Game Maker and stuff with like really beautiful looking patterns. I brought in a VFX guy who does stuff in Adobe After Effects to do like some just cool looking 3D effects and artwork for us to incorporate. And then we put it all together in like video editing software. It was a huge project and an enormous amount of fun to make.
And then it got all like blind revealed in the middle of a race.
Yeah, yeah. Watching like the players, we made that for the players. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Of course, it's spectacular for the audience, but like it's the players. Hence the name of the level, Shattered Reality. Like we're telling the players, like this is not the S&W that you know. And so we got to watch their jaws freaking drop when the controller was put into their hands and they had to play this crazy experience that we prepared for them.
Mhm. Yeah, I've always loved like especially the Mario World stuff because especially in that example, you can do just anything. Like, oh,
Yeah,
Mario
yeah,
World? No. The Mario World you know is dead and gone. Enjoy whatever the hell this is. Like the Mario Maker's cool and all, but you are limited to what you can do in Mario Maker. Mario World just feels like nah. Do whatever.
Yeah, you get to design whatever you want. Well, of course, like if you do look into it on the engineering side of things,
Yeah.
they do have to make a lot of considerations to integrate their work into the S&W game engine. But
Hmm.
that in itself is a really cool and interesting challenge. And it's very fun, I think, to uphold the core of the S&W game engine and the mechanics that people love so much about it, while also bringing in like crazy new mechanics and obstacles and enemies and that sort of thing to keep the experience fresh.
Hmm. Yeah. So I always look forward to those specifically, and I feel like every event has something like that. I think this upcoming one's doing a Mario Maker thing again.
Yeah,
So.
they are. And Mario Maker has gotten very, very crazy over the
Hmm.
years because of well, the designers have gotten so incredibly good, but they've also discovered their own fair share of glitches and exploits that allow them to perform really interesting behaviors that should not really be possible. So
Hmm.
that's gotten quite interesting as well. And you can bet that like every year that Mario Maker is going to be showcased, they're also going to showcase some of the new stuff that they have found in that game and continue to blow minds. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to that.
Yep. Well, to bring it all back, we didn't really talk much about Yoshi's story going into more like the modern time, like at least your experience throughout the years with it. But when you started, and obviously there were no other runs, apparently, at least with the category you focused on. But how did that scene develop, and how did you? I know you to this day have the record. I'm assuming, if I'm not
Um,
forgetting.
I do in any percent, but as
Any
of
percent.
now, all melons is held by a Japanese runner named Meaty, who uh, came into the scene and very, very quickly started putting pressure on the top positions of the leaderboard.
I see.
That started happening around 2017,
Okay.
and, and man, this was the first time that like up until that point, I was pretty much just always at the top. You know, like there wasn't significant competition. There were a couple of other amazing players who were like um, you know, like if I let a category languish, then they would actually catch up to me and I would have to come back and like push the time down. But all of a sudden there was a player that like they came in and like beat my time and then I would come in and improve it and then they would come in and improve it again in succession and it put on some serious pressure. And that was I think the first time where it went from more of a fun casual thing to like I have to defend my title as the best player at this game. And man, it was pretty stressful, you know?
Hmm.
Uh and and I still feel that drive because, you know, as I mentioned, he does currently have the all melons record. I kind of took a break from the game after last SGDQ. I don't think I've played it since then, which is
Mm.
really unfortunate. I'm hoping to get back to it soon. But we're in a spot where there are so many improvements we know we can make to our runs in this game, and it's really just a matter of executing. But the execution, of course, has also gotten really, really challenging.
Hmm.
Uh, but it's a smaller community, so it's really a matter of like the few people at the top having to really put in the work and get like really fantastic execution. It's a really amazing spot to be in, and without that kind of intense competition coming in and like some more top players, the game never would have reached the heights that it currently has in its discovery and technical achievement. So it's in an extremely good spot, and I'm really thrilled about it. It has pushed everyone to continue uh, bringing that time down and coming up with all kinds of new techniques and discoveries in the game. And I think it has a very bright future as well.
Hmm. I know quite a bit earlier we were talking about how like you got to kind of discover that game and kind of build it kind of from the ground up because just the community was so small. Like I come from where everything's already found, and it you get more enjoyment kind of like from competing at a high level in like a very active community. But
Yeah.
and every speedrunner has what they're more interested in. Like, I don't know if I'd be as interested into the whole developing something from scratch. I kind of like building off of what's already been established, but you kind of got to experience both now, the discovery and now the you're in the competitive aspect of it.
That's true. Yeah, the discovery and the creativity has always brought me a lot of joy. Uh, but as one person, I was only ever able to do so much.
Hmm.
And it was once the community grew a little bit, but especially once we started getting a couple of more like sort of top level players who understood, once again, I was talking about this earlier, how to apply the discoveries that you make and what's actually notable to mess with. And uh that was really when we started truly pushing things uh, into beyond what I would have imagined possible. It was the combination of like these top players uh, finding these discoveries and using them to improve their times and beat my times. So yeah, pretty interesting, like high pressure environment. Uh, and maybe so you came in 2017 with SMB1.
Yes.
Maybe you felt some of that because like how much of that time have you had like a competitive time on the leaderboard? Like, were you competitive when it was still in the 455? Like just breached
Hmm.
into 455?
Um, Let me think. I joined when record was 456.8 because
Okay,
I the first any percent record I know happened when I was like knowledgeable about the scene was Darby and getting the mid 456.
right. Okay,
Um, I know I got good fairly quickly. I was actually on like emulator with horrendous input delay for like 6 months, and if I didn't do that, I probably would have gotten better a lot faster even, because I ended up
right.
going to SGQ 2018 and played on consoles, and I was like, oh, this is what being really good at the game feels like, and then I kind of ran with it from there.
Okay,
But at least in NA%, I was never like I was in the top 10 for a while. I mean, I still am. So I think I stayed in the top 10 for like 6 years, maybe 11th at one point. I don't know, but
okay.
I was never world record contender except for like one tiny brief period before Nifsky dominated every human being ever. But
Yeah, yeah.
um,
But then,
I did get top three though in any percent. I've had the record in every other category, which I find more important, but everyone casually only cares about any percent. Very sad, but
yeah, yeah. But what I'm thinking is maybe you have experienced something kind of similar at some point where you're like in top 10, top 5, whatever it may be, and then either there's a minor new discovery or someone just decides to incorporate, like, for example, Lightning 4.2 or Fast Excel in every World 8 level, like this sort of thing.
mhm.
And people start pushing those times, and maybe you're like, oh my God, now I have to start doing that.
um, with any I don't know. I kind of did all the strats I was interested in. Like I would be the one to implement something new. This is specifically for like warpless and stuff. Any percent
Right, right.
I never really had the drive, and nowadays I haven't really played Mario 1 for PBs in like 4 years.
Okay,
So
okay.
I it kind of just me personally, like I feel like I can't be competitive. Like everyone's just so good now that I kind of lost the joy and kind of trying to compete and fell off. That's why I switched to 2J, because I can still be somewhat competitive there so far. But
Yeah, yeah.
um I'm trying
And,
to
and
think
that's
back
well,
then.
that's kind of a part of what I'm talking about, though. It's
Hmm.
like you put in your 2000 runs and you get the run, and then there's just one tiny thing that pushes it a few milliseconds further that people start going for.
Hmm.
So now you're just like, well, here we go again. And you put in your next 2000 runs to like get that incorporates the new tiny little thing. And that takes a lot of energy.
Hmm.
That can like feel pretty exhausting, and you can feel the drive to do that sort of thing. And in many
Yes.
cases, people do, but it definitely takes a lot out of you as well.
I think I would have felt that more in like category extensions. Like I was known for having like half the category extension records at one point, again,
Okay.
pre-Nifsky, but
Yeah, yeah.
um so like yeah, there was a runner royalty. He would have like a bunch of category extension records and we'd fight over them. Like, oh, he beat me, I'll beat him back the same day or something, or that kind of competitive stuff. So I
Yeah.
definitely had that a little bit. I guess the best example I can think of is the glitchless category. Like I had a reign of the record for like 4 years. And there was only one brief period in my reign where someone beat it. And that was a category where you just would have to add fast excels in 8.4. Like that was the only time save.
Okay.
And that just got pushed like almost a full second in 8.4 alone from like the first record that was perfect entering that stage. From when I first took it until where I ended up taking it was like zero. 0.6 seconds of 8.4 time save. But
Right.
yeah, so I had this arraign, and then a runner JS Carbo beat me, and then Nifsky beat him like a week later. But then I came back and beat Nifsky like 2 days later, and then I held it,
Nice.
and then I had another reign for like another couple of years. But I took to a point where I finally broke the second barrier, and then I was like, all right, I'm done. And now
Okay.
Nifsky has it. There was another frame rule you could do that I never did that he did. But,
Right.
I took it to a point where I was pretty satisfied and left it at that. But yeah, there was a competition there where I had that reign, and then for like a week, a couple other people had, and I was like, nope, and then took it back and kept it for a while.
Gotcha. Yeah,
It was very motivating, and that's what made me like actually push to get this barrier, because I was like, okay, if I don't work on this now, someone's going to do it, and I want to do it first. So
that makes sense.
that's
Yeah.
what I did.
Uh, Yoshi's Story 90%. We have the opportunity now to improve the record by a couple seconds. And I think that like it's going to happen. And I think when it does, it's going to hurt.
Mm.
Like, given that the record has stood since 2017 at this point.
Is this the 90% record?
Yeah,
You,
yeah.
you
It's
your record stood since 2017,
yeah. But
like the
pretty
same
small
time,
community.
or
Yeah.
wow,
1059.
wow. I mean,
Yeah.
I know it's a small community, but still, oh, that's a long time. Like
Yeah,
8 years almost.
it's something where like you have to spend a very long time with the game to build up like the level of execution in order to start approaching that sort of time.
Hmm.
So like it's a short run, but a very, very major commitment to like approach it, you know? Like I don't know, for instance, SMB1, like the barrier is pretty low nowadays to hit sub 5, right?
Oh
Like
yeah, I say
you can
anyone
kind of
can
bust
do it
that
in
out.
like a week if you
Yeah.
like if you care and try and know how to
Yeah.
practice. You can do it in like a
Yeah.
week. Yeah.
Yeah. I think Yoshi's Story like sub 12 you can probably hit in like a few months if you're a highly dedicated player, and that's sub 12. You have another minute to go in order to approach world record. It's very demanding technically.
Hmm.
So I think that's largely why it's like extremely accessible category and fun and easy to get into because it's short and it's fun, but but very, very demanding and requires a lot of dedication to start approaching the top level.
Hmm. Yeah, Mario one's very similar in that aspect, I guess. Like
Yeah, yeah.
you can
It's
get to
I
this
guess it's
easy
just
part, and then like it exponentially gets difficult
yeah,
to
yeah.
continue.
It's the same thing. Like when I say sub 12, that is like maybe sub 5 in SMB1.
Hmm.
And then when I say like reaching like 1110x in Yoshi's Story, that's like 455 in SMB1. It's
Yeah.
just like yeah, it's exponential.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely get that. Um, but yeah, it sounds like there's been competition at least for all melons, so it was just interesting that any percent has kind of
Yeah,
left open a while.
it's the same runner who is competitive here, and he plays a number of games. He speedruns various games, and so he comes and goes
Hmm.
in terms of Yoshi's Story, and like me and everyone else, like he has to decide which categories he wants to focus on. you know.
It does sound like
So
all
he
melons is the more of the favorite upon runners to sink time into.
yeah, he like, he put in some any percent grind to try to beat the 1059, and he's 100% capable of it, and he incorporated a couple minor strategic tweaks in order to like save time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's very exhausting because the inputs are so dense and you're playing the same couple of levels over and over and over again, it just doesn't have the same like variety and opportunity for like discovery and time saves like All Melons does. All
Mm-hmm.
Melons being like an hour and 40 minutes around top level.
Wow.
So yeah, just it's more fun to grind that out, I think, overall.
Yeah, and that's a substantial time difference between 80% and
It very
all
much is,
melons.
yeah. Yeah, 11 minutes versus an hour 40.
Yeah.
Uh Not to mention we already have like a whole bunch of techniques we know that we can apply to all melons to improve the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's an interesting draw there as well. It's like any percent is just like you need perfect execution, and like the story has already been told. Like it's quote solved. Obviously
Yeah.
not literally, but like you just know everything you have to do in order to get a top time at any percent.
Mm-hmm.
All melons is like there is more opportunity to mess around, and you get to choose like what you want to incorporate. There's an actual risk reward factor
Mm-hmm.
of how much time does this save versus how much less consistent is it going to make my runs. And that's an aspect that is really fun to see in speedruns as well, is making those trade-offs.
Mm-hmm. Like for Mario 1, Warpless was always what intrigued me more than any percent when I got into it. Because like, with any percent you're playing the same one level usually over and over.
Yeah, yeah.
At least in Warpless, you could route the frame rules in a very specific way, and then you execute your route, and that's how that worked. And you could, interchange certain things, and that was just always more fun. And then, it was a little longer, so yeah, there was more room. Obviously, not as large as the difference between 90% all melons, but still like four
Yeah.
times longer
Yeah.
almost.
It's still the same spirit where you get to enjoy the aspect of decision making, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and
At least for
that,
routing. Execution,
yes.
obviously, you still have to execute perfectly because it's Mario 1, but like
Yeah,
you
you
can't
like
route
you've
any percent. It's just here, do it.
yeah, you've routed the frame rules you need to be on, and so you just have to execute that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there is still decision making in like your route, and in making that decision, it's like you set a goal, and that goal is like kind of risk reward trade offs, like how much
Mm-hmm.
like how much of a grind is this specific level going to be based on the frame rule I want to hit versus like my ability to actually achieve this goal.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Definitely remember all that. But again, that has gone beyond my skill level. So
Right.
fell off of that
But
too,
then
but we'll see.
in runs that are an hour plus, an hour 40 or whatever, there is a lot of improvising, of course.
Yeah.
And that's another really fun component of these runs is that like uh you can afford to make a half-second mistake, or you can afford to preemptively uh decide to lose half a second because you don't trust the situation. Like you can go into it and maybe there's a tiny detail that's different. So you're like, I'm just gonna be a tiny bit safe and lose zero point 0.5 seconds, 1 second, in order to like just avoid that scenario where the run dies. And it's really fun to make those micro decisions on the fly. And that's something that at top level in any percent in Yoshi's story, you're not afforded that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you can make nano decisions, but not micro decisions in any percent because like you can't afford to lose any time, Like if you in most levels in any percent, like if you lose half a second, you have to reset at the top level.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have to be perfect.
Yeah.
So that element of decision making is lost, and that can make the longer categories a lot more fun to grind out.
And yeah, Warpless at a top level, at least at this point, is basically any percent too. But that's what drew me into racing the game. In like 2018 through 2020 was, you didn't really route you couldn't really route that yet, so you just, you would have to make decisions based on, oh, I lost a little bit of time here. I don't know what pattern I'm gonna get. I should play safe and do this, but now I might lose too much time and the other person might pull ahead. That's what I
That's
really
true.
liked about Warpless, was doing races back in the day.
Yeah, yeah. Races are definitely really fun for that reason.
But races now for Warpless is you try to execute a specific route anyway.
Oh
So,
yeah, I guess. And
but
like,
back then it
so
was a little different.
yeah, yeah. I guess so. That means you either like achieve your run and you like
You either get
or
a
whatever,
1903 or you don't.
or it's just you don't finish the run.
Well, yeah, you either get a 1903 or you get like a high 190x to like 191x because you start playing safe because you don't have the frame rules anymore.
Right, right. Yeah, that makes
But
sense.
like for example, I remember the last Warpless race I did, I think, yeah, was one of the Mario 1 tournaments, and in the Warpless run, me and another runner tied to the frame, and I won by now I did win by 5 CPU cycles, but that doesn't really count. We tied to the frame, and our points were
How was
tied too, so that was a bit unfortunate.
how were the CPU cycles calculated there?
Okay, you know Flippity Dibbity's tech, right? The race
Yep.
technology.
Yep.
Yeah. Um. With his program, he's able his his runs are timed from CPU cycles. Like that's just
Okay.
how the timing is done, and then he makes it to where it's like the frame count.
That's very cool.
But yeah, so that's how I knew.
That's very cool.
So like in his data, like I won the race, but because it was actually a frame tie, he had to like change it. Like actually tie, it was a tie. Can't say you won, but our points were tied anyway, so we just tied completely anyway the whole time. It
Okay.
was really funny,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, that's funny.
yeah, the state of Mario 1 right now, like not how it used to be. I guess is the point. Like it used to be similar to what you've been describing, but nowadays it's just not like that anymore. It's really funny.
Yeah, but that's why SMB 2J is like the
Hmm.
sanctuary for SMB 1 veterans.
I guess, but even that's to the point now where I'm routing frame rules and categories where you used to just YOLO it and hope for the best, and
Yeah, that's true,
that game's
but there's
execution is just significantly more difficult in some scenarios where
yeah,
ugh.
but there's more flexibility to pick your battles because
There is
of
more flexibility, yes.
the longer game, the different categories, and
Mhm.
and also all stars.
Ugh.
Like two. Okay, some people really like all stars.
Nah,
So
no, no, it's different. I like making fun of All
yeah,
Stars in general because there's issues with it, but for like Warpless D4, for example, like that's a fantastic speed run. Like, wow,
yeah,
that's really good.
yeah. I would just like historically I would joke that like 2J and All Stars are like the SMB one retirement home
Yeah,
because that's where you like
that's
actually get to it's those areas where you get to choose how you want to have fun basically.
that's where I've been the past few years, this
Yeah,
retirement
yeah,
home.
yeah.
But yeah, I totally get it. No, it's I have a weird relationship with 2J because it that game really pisses me off very easily, but also like yeah, I can actually PB in these games and be like close to world record levels. Where in Mario 1 that is kind of it's kind of been eliminated. And once Nifsky decides to really tackle 2J, like it's over for everyone anyway. So you kind of like I'm kind of in this weird spot where I'm a little burnt out of it, but I also know like if I don't do it now, it's over. So if I want to get records now, I got to do it while I still can.
That's interesting. So you do feel like a degree of pressure in that
Oh
regard.
yes, of course. And also Cosmic's like Cosmic almost has every record except for any percent and uh World's A through D any percent because I have that right now. But
Okay.
so I know he's gonna try to get everything, and I kind of want to stop him. And again, when Nifsky decides to really tackle 2J, that'll stop him too. But just because of I don't know exactly how he does it. His brain is just crazy. I don't know, his practice habits and everything just it works really well. But this is my opportunity. So there is pressure there. Yeah, like it's now or never. Um, if I want to make moves, I got to do it now. And I still haven't been very good about it. I have not been putting in much effort this entire year, really. But there are other reasons for that I won't get into. But yeah, I need to get over my irritations with the game and really focus up and achieve the stuff I want to do because
Yeah,
there's limited
it's just
time.
there is limited time, there is limited energy. That's pretty
Yes,
important, right? Like
energy has been very
it
difficult recently.
yeah, man, it is for a game as demanding in execution as a game like SMB1, SMB2J, in my case Yoshi's Story, like
Hmm.
just putting a solid 2 hours into like maximum focus, maximum execution takes so much out of you. And uh so it can be 2 hours, but it kind of can become your day.
Hmm.
And then that also makes it a lot harder to decide to put in those 2 hours because it's going to take so much out of you. So mentally, you're kind of like you have to psych yourself up to like put
Hmm.
through that amount of energy. It can be pretty tough,
And
maybe
yet,
especially as we're like continuing to get older. I don't know.
yeah, and plus, like, maybe I won't get a good amount of sleep the next day, and then I work super early. I have a part time, so
Mm,
it's only like 4 hours, but sometimes it's pretty physically and mentally demanding, and I'll come home and I'm just like, I can't. And that happens a lot more than I wish it would, but you need to have physical and mental strength to do top level speedrunning. That just goes for
yeah,
most people. And if you don't have that and you don't have that, you just know I can't perform today, so I'm just not going to. And it
yeah,
sucks because then you
absolutely.
threw away a day of attempts, but like again, it's just something you have to have.
It's true. Yeah, that's really big for Yoshi's Story as well because Yoshi's Story has a ton of button mashing.
No, yeah, that's the worst.
Yeah, in fact, every time when you jump in Yoshi's Story, the faster you mash the B button while jumping, which by the way, jump of course is A, so you have to mash B while holding jump.
Mm.
So it's not even just button mashing, it's like you have to come up with this special like demanding technique to like mash B as fast as possible while holding A. And the faster you mash, the higher you jump. So you can bet that we're going to come up with all kinds of jumps that take advantage of like fast mashing. Uh, but then we are doomed to execute that every single run all over the place, all over the game. And yeah, it is pretty dang demanding physically.
Yeah, I'm pretty lucky with that. Like a couple of the categories I'm playing right now require like one tiny section where you have to mash very quickly in a very particular way. And if you can get there, if it's 2 minutes in and you get there a lot, it gets a bit annoying to deal with. But
It's probably for a wall clip, right?
yeah, it's for a wall clip. I mean, the
Yeah.
worst part with the categories I'm doing right now is the last level of the run. You have to do like 2 frame perfects to do a firebar skip. Like at the
Okay.
very end, and it's like you do all the hard stuff to get there, and then you have one chance to do 2 frame perfect input, so you die.
Yeah, that's rough.
And one of them doesn't
But
have a good visual cue. At least the way I do it, you have to do a frame perfect B press when
okay.
you're just about to run off a ledge, and it's like, well, I won't know if I hit it, and then you jump, and if you die, you don't know if you pressed A wrong or B wrong or both.
Yeah.
It's fun.
That's the story of SMB1
Yeah,
or 2J. That's
yeah, it really
like
is.
you that's what you signed up for.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I have no one to blame but myself, but that's just the route I decided to take in speedrunning, I guess. But I guess
Yeah.
it's worked out pretty well. I can say I did some cool things in the scene because of it.
Yeah. Clearly your accomplishments over the years have been quite monumental. And in a game that
Well,
of course has much hotter competition than what I do. So,
well, yeah, I'd never
it's
compare anything anyway, but
yeah, yeah. Like man, I hate when that comes up. People are like, which game is the harder speed run, or like which game takes more skill? It's like, bro,
Yeah.
please just let people enjoy their game.
Well, someone will
Like, come
say
on.
like, how would you relate getting this time in this game to this time in this game? Even if it's like
Oh yeah.
Mario 1 and 2J, like even those which are like the almost the exact same game with different level design. Obviously there's some other stuff, but like
Yeah.
even that I can't really compare. They're just so different.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it just that question is always impossible to answer pretty much.
Yeah. And it's funny because it comes from people who probably don't even play the games.
Mhm.
So it's almost like they have a fundamental misunderstanding of what matters to speedrunners
Mhm.
because like the top speedrunners aren't answering or caring about these questions really.
Yeah.
They're just enjoying the game.
Mhm. Yeah, like I can't really be mad about the question because yeah, it's usually like they don't know, but it's like I just can't answer. There's no good answer here. That's just the
Yeah, yeah.
unfortunate truth of the matter.
Yeah. It comes from a space of like people's desire to learn more about these games and like the skill and the execution, which is cool.
Mhm.
Like they're expressing interest.
Yeah,
They're
like
expressing interest, but like
there are other questions that could like better explain I guess what they want to know, but just the general comparing two speedruns usually is impossible to compare if especially if they're just drastically different things.
yeah,
Like they
very
require
true.
different skill sets, different mindsets, different usually controllers and it like everything's just so different. Like
Yeah.
I don't know. That's my say on that matter.
Yeah, I feel you on that.
Well,
Um,
I'm kind of running out
man,
of
it's
things to
been
ask.
yeah, it's been actually I didn't expect this much time to pass this quickly, but
Yeah,
yeah, it could be around time to start wrapping up. I feel pretty satisfied as well with all the stuff we talked about.
yeah, and I hear that a lot. Like, wow, it's been 2 hours already.
Yeah, yeah, that's what
Like people
happens.
ask how long this usually takes, and I say like 2 hours, and like, there's no way, and then it's always 2 hours. It's like
Yeah,
I
in
know
this
my
case
show.
it was 3 hours this time.
Almost, we're getting there.
Yeah,
Yeah, the recording is like just over 2.5, but
yeah,
but I guess yeah, I'll do the wrap up questions here. So the last thing I
sure.
usually ask is future plans in speedrunning or in general, near future, far future.
Uh, Yoshi's Story is my exclusive speed game,
Hmm.
and there's so much more ground to tread.
Yeah, I guess I
So
never
many
asked.
more.
Did you have you ever tried to run anything else?
No.
Okay, fair
Uh,
enough.
like I ran a meme game just for fun at one point.
Okay,
That doesn't really count. And I also do Metroid Prime randomizers.
okay, that's
So I
adjacent.
have
Yeah.
yeah, it's adjacent. So I learned a lot of tech in that game for the purpose of sequence breaking and all of that because it just like makes the like that's what makes those randomizers fun and interesting, right? Is to be able
Mm.
to like play more out of order so you can get more interesting random seeds. Um, but I never like sat down and like tried to grind out like speed like major speedrun optimizations for that game. It's like it's nice to get a better time, but that's not really my focus in doing those randomizers.
Hmm.
Uh, so yeah, Yoshi's Story is just my one true home. That's the one where I put in like all of my effort and knowledge and skill.
Okay, fair enough. We all speedrun in different ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Obviously, I've focused more on Mario 1 and 2J, but I've definitely done a bunch of other stuff briefly. But
Right, right. It can be tempting to dabble because
mhm,
once you learn that like speedrunning is such a great way to just get more enjoyment out of a game that you really love,
mhm,
uh, like you start thinking about doing that for other games that you just enjoy revisiting anyway. And yeah, like the temptation is quite understandable. But
oh yeah,
just for whatever reason, like it's always been about Yoshi's Story for me. I think maybe because I was like kind of one of the pioneers of speedrunning that game that it really does feel um like my home.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Again, everyone does speedrunning differently, and there's no really wrong way to do it. So
Yeah, yeah.
the fun part about it. But yeah, I was asking about future plans. Kind of went off on a tangent there.
In terms of speedrunning, it's Yoshi's Story. And of
Just
course, as a developer, I have various things going on.
yeah.
Um, I'm working pretty hard right now on Magicore, my Amiga game,
Hmm.
and that's probably still a couple of years out, but I think it's shaping up to be something pretty special. And if you happen to go to a GDQ in the future, then look around the practice room. I'm probably going to have my Amiga set up, and you can try out a demo of the game.
Yeah, it's always there. It's the new Pringles. They got rid of the Pringles machine. Very, very sad. It's there in
Oh, they
spirit
did?
though. Yeah, like there was always a Genesis with like Pringles with decorated in Pringles. That's all.
I
A
thought.
TV is always there, but I never see like a Genesis with the game anymore.
Oh, interesting. No, I thought I last AGDQ, I feel like I saw it, but
Yeah, they
I don't
had the
know.
TV and all the Pringles decorated, but I didn't see like that big
Oh,
thing there is
okay.
they had a dragster set up. That was fun.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, but yeah, I'm bringing my Amiga to every
Hmm.
event, and well, I have Magic on it a lot of the time, but other times like we like run a roulette where I just like pick again from like the dredges of the Amiga preservation library. I like drag up some ridiculous nonsense, and everyone has fun with it.
Yeah, I've seen some interesting things being played on the TV while there, so
Yeah, yeah.
it's always fun. But yeah, I guess that's everything then in terms of speedrunning. So
Awesome.
I guess the final thing is just self promote however you want to.
Um, I don't feel like it. My info is already down there, like on
Okay.
the, yeah.
Want me to do
You
it
could
for
just
you?
sure. I don't know.
Well,
Just
I did the
search my
shout
name
out.
around and you'll find like my stuff basically. In terms of social media nowadays, I'm most active on Blue Sky, so just
Mm-hmm.
find me on Blue Sky. I have a personal website as well. If you just go to dansalvato.com, I have um I have a blog again where I go into a lot of technical detail about Magicore and some other stuff that I'm working on. So,
Mm-hmm.
if that interests you, feel free to check that out. But yeah, I generally just have a pretty low key like social presence, and I'm not doing the whole like content creator trying to build my brand sort of thing anymore. You
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean? I'm just chilling. So if you want to check out my stuff, then feel free.
But yeah, if you want to watch Yoshi's story though, I'll link the Twitch and YouTube, so that'll
Oh
be
yeah,
there. Blue Sky, of course, but
I gotta get back to Yoshi's Story, man. It's been far too long, and I miss it.
hmm.
So
Well,
I think that's in my near future.
another good thing about speedrunning is it's not going anywhere, so you can always come
That's
back
true.
and grind however you so want.
Exactly.
But yeah, I guess that'll wrap things up for today. So thanks everyone for watching. Feel free to
Yeah.
follow the show here on Twitch and YouTube. I truly forgot what episode number this is, but it's something in the almost 120. So
That's really impressive.
yeah, been doing this a while. Feel like I
Yeah.
bring up just how often I do these every show now, because
Yeah.
the number continues to get absurdly large. But we're still out
Yeah.
here talking about speedrunning. It's a fun
True. Yeah.
topic, and there's a
Of
lot of
course.
speedrunners out there, so not exactly hurting for content.
That's also true. Yeah. Good stuff. Appreciate you having me. It was definitely a lot of fun chatting.
Yeah, I really appreciate you coming on. And again, it was very short notice, so appreciate you doing that as well. But
Yeah. Of course.
but yeah, I'll obviously link all your stuff. It's on screen. Will be in the YouTube description. I'll link all my stuff, YouTube description, and that'll be it. So I'll go ahead and end things off here. Thanks for watching, everyone. Have a good day.
Thanks, everybody.
Yep. See ya.